Distinguished heads of states and government, distinguished ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I call to order the first leadership dialogue of the international meeting entitled Stockholm+50, A Healthy Planet for Prosperity of All, Our Responsibility, Our Opportunity. Allow me to take this opportunity to cordially welcome all of you to this leadership dialogue. I'm Stephen Guilbeault, Minister of Environment and Climate Change of Canada. I'm honored to serve as your co-chair together with His Excellency Gustavo Rafael Manrique Miranda, Minister of Environment, Water and Ecological Transition of Ecuador. The topic of this afternoon's leadership dialogue is reflecting on the urgent need for actions to achieve a healthy planet and prosperity for all. A background paper on this topic has been issued as document A-CONF.238-4. The summary of our discussions here today will be presented to the closing plenary meeting of the international meeting tomorrow afternoon, Friday, June 3rd. I'm also pleased to inform participants that Ms. Nozipo Shabalala, the Chief Executive Officer of the Conversation Strategist, will serve as our moderator today. Allow me at this point to deliver some introductory remarks in my capacity as co-chair of this important leadership dialogue. I will be speaking in French. Stockholm+50 représente une occasion.
Stockholm+50 is a fantastic opportunity for us to take stock of the road we've taken, the road to multilateralism. We must take concrete measures to uphold our commitments. That is the way to confront global environmental challenges. Now, this first leadership dialogue is going to be focusing on the following challenges. How can we transform our relationship with nature, taking into account biodiversity loss and implementing bold action to stop climate change and related processes? Next, how can we ensure sustainable development to combat pollution, specifically plastics pollution and chemicals and wastes, and this on a sustainable basis? Thirdly, inclusion and justice, as well as intergenerational equity with the due participation of Indigenous persons, local communities, young people and women. How can we incorporate that? The objective of our meeting today is to come up with concrete recommendations on how we can tackle these challenges. A great deal of preparatory work went into putting together these meetings and laying the groundwork for our discussions. I should like to hail the governments of Sweden, Kenya and UNEP. Thank you very much for facilitating the work of the preparatory meeting, which took place in New York. There were also informal deliberations. This is a solid foundation for our discussions today. Furthermore, I should like to express my gratitude to Ambassador Stefan Dieu of Canada, Special Envoy to UN and the EU, for his work in the preparatory deliberations.
That I look forward to build here on Stockholm with your support. They underlined that to achieve a healthy planet, we need effective and fair multilateralism, human rights to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, and integrated and joint approaches. Throughout the preliminary process, participants stressed the responsibilities and roles of governments and all actors to achieve a healthy planet. We heard the need for all governments to cooperate and be responsible and accountable for implementing their multilateral commitments, to reform environmental governance systems for greater accountability, transparency, and balance, to recognize the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment and the use rights-based approach, to develop national legislation that recognizes environmental crimes as serious crimes. We also heard the need to integrate lifestyle, resource efficiency and circular economy approaches into strategies and action plans, and for the private sector to apply their creativity and innovation to solving sustainable development challenges. I would like to stress 3 priorities for Canada that we also shared with participants. The first is the urgency needed to take action. We are living in a time of unprecedented global crises. Rapid decline of biodiversity and climate change together threaten our economy, food security, and health. In most cases, we know the problems and the solutions, but we need more ambition to implement needed actions. Canada recognizes carbon pricing as a key solution. That is why at COP26, Prime Minister Trudeau called on all countries to expand the use of carbon pricing globally and to work together to triple global emissions covered by a pricing system to 60% by 2030. The second priority is the need to take an integrated and coordinated approach when it comes to solutions. The Global Biodiversity Framework that will be an outcome of the upcoming COP15 needs to work synergistically with the Paris Agreement to achieve biodiversity gains and climate adaptation and mitigation benefits wherever possible. For example, implementing nature-based solutions that support biodiversity, such as conserving carbon-rich natural areas and restoring wetlands and mangroves, in addition to efforts to lower carbon emission, will help us accelerate towards our climate action goals. The third priority is the need for all actors to be engaged. Governments, private sector, Indigenous peoples, women and girls, youth and others, we all have a meaningful role to play. Implementation requires resources to support our action cohesively, effectively, and efficiently. We need to align financial flows, domestic and international, public and private, with environmental objectives for a sustainable future. This includes the need to look at the role of policies and environments in mobilizing and aligning finance. With those themes and priorities in mind, I look forward to hearing your input today on what concrete solutions we can take collectively to drive global environmental action and transform our commitments into action. In closing, I would like to highlight the bottom-up nature of the leadership dialogues. I am pleased to see the wide range of countries and stakeholders, including youth, who have engaged in this process so far. I look forward to all your inputs here today. I now have the pleasure of giving the floor to my friend and fellow co-chair, His Excellency Gustavo Rafael Manrique Miranda, Ministry of Environment, Water and Ecological Transition of Ecuador, to deliver some opening remarks. Thank you.
Distinguished heads of states and government, distinguished ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to make this opportunity to cordially welcome all of you to this first leadership dialogue with the Stockholm+50 conference. My name is Gustavo Manrique Miranda, Minister of Environment, Water and Ecological Transition of Ecuador. And as my colleague mentioned, I'm very pleased to chair this dialogue together with His Excellency Steve Guilbeault, Minister of Environment and Climate of Canada. It is an honor for me and for Ecuador to serve as your co-chair this afternoon. I will now switch to Spanish, my mother tongue, in order to assure that I can express myself with the passion that I feel, and truly mean passion, for sustainability. A nombre del Gobierno del Ecuador.
On behalf of the Government of Ecuador, I thank you all for being here today participating in Dialogue 1, whose goal is to create a space for us to be able to have brief but relevant reflections on the urgent necessity to focus efforts in order to have among us a healthy planet and, of course, to guarantee the prosperity of current and subsequent generations. Before we start this first dialogue, I believe it is important to take a moment to remember what we are commemorating. In 1972, the international community, alarmed by environmental challenges and the future of human beings and all life on Earth, convened for the first time a global meeting to address the nexus between the human well-being and nature's health. Today, 50 years later, we are still in the same combat, where now 193 sovereign states continue seeking structural solutions to what we now know to be a planetary crisis. In these efforts, we have registered successes internationally, with the existence of international political fora that are numerous, where numerous environmental objectives are adopted for all countries. we are here today in this room, and we know that in order to ensure the fulfillment of the different goals, we need to take some sacrifices across the board, at home, health, work, and beyond. For this reason, it is important to ask ourselves in this room, what are we going to achieve today through this dialogue? What do we need to discuss here? What goals should we be able to achieve so that we are proud of the work that has been carried out for the next 2 days? So that when we go back home, each of us, after the efforts that we have deployed here, we can tell our dear ones how proud we are for addressing all the necessary subjects. Let me set the scene and share brief reflections for us to start our dialogue today. First and foremost, there is a real sense of urgency globally that calls for all stakeholders to increase collective action in order to achieve the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the 17 goals. 2, urgent action calls for a global approach to drive just transitions. This includes fostering investment, innovation, access to clean technology, phasing down and phasing out progressively in a just and equitable manner fossil fuels. 3, we need to close financing gaps and to promote resource mobilization. This is indispensable for us to deal with the global challenges we are facing. As developing countries, this means that we should respect one another with our local realities and our national realities. Finally, the 4th theme that I believe we should keep in mind is that each nation is dealing with local challenges that call for global solutions and actions. Therefore, it is necessary for the next 2 days for us to be open and direct with each other, and that today we move away from our calculated moves and deal with our own realities. Let us also look at what we as nations have looked at for Stockholm+50, an instrument that has allowed us to look at our concrete needs that will serve as a guideline for the actions to be taken by Ecuador. In the main subjects that came up during the consultation, the need to strengthen governance and working together between stakeholders, 2, including the different stakeholders in the building and designing of public norms and policies, and 3, strengthening educational environment at all levels. In fact, 60% of the Ecuadorian population wants environmental education. I believe that is the same in all of your countries. In conclusion, the challenge that we have today as we participate in this dialogue is to be brave and to be full of conviction that here, as we discuss the different challenges openly, that in Stockholm+50 will not duplicate ongoing dialogues in different fora and in different initiatives. To the contrary, we are seeking to increase the momentum and build the necessary partnerships so that we are able to respond to the crisis of climate change in an efficient and agile manner. Today, we are at a tipping point. We have no time to lose. So I invite you to share your opinions and your stands with no fear, because when difference of opinions are well managed, then we are able to find solutions towards development. With these few words, I call to order and I open the first dialogue. Let us use this space as an opportunity to reflect and to dialogue. I thank the government of Sweden and the government of Kenya for organizing this opportunity for constructive dialogue. I am full of enthusiasm to share with all of you and to define alternatives for each of our countries.
over to Ms. Nosipo Shabalala, CEO of the Conversation Strategies, to moderate the first interactive segment of this leadership dialogue. Mrs. Shabalala, the floor is yours.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very big thank you to our co-chairs. Now, as we get ready for the very first leadership dialogue, allow me just to spend a few seconds sharing with you what we're about to experience over the next 3 hours. We're going to have two sets of panelists joining us in a moment. We're going to start off with the first set of panelists. We're going to have a rapid-fire interaction here on stage, and you'll hear the language, rapid fire. So it's going to be engaging, dynamic, it's going to be fast-paced, and thereafter, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask my panelists to adopt a listening posture, because I'm going to come off stage and we're going to de-stage the conversation, and we're going to bring in the contributions from the nation states and governments, as well as stakeholders from the UN system. And so we're going to bring in your voice into this conversation. We'll make our way back onto the stage and give our panelists an opportunity to react and to comment on some of the insights, some of the propositions, some of the challenges that have been shared. And then we're going to repeat. And so we're going to once again call a second set of panelists. We'll again go into a rapid fire engagement with them. We'll again go back to the broader audience and bring your voices into this conversation. And then again, give them an opportunity to react. We're going to close off the session by welcoming back the co-chairs to share with us their closing remarks. And so with that, it gives me great pleasure now to welcome our very first set of panelists who are going to be joining us. I'd like to call onto the stage, please, His Excellency Virginijus Šivenkius, the European Commissioner for Environment, Water and Ecological Transition, of Environment, Oceans and Fisheries, Madame Azar Karam, the Secretary General of Religions for Peace. Thank you very much. I'm also going to call on Mr. Akim Steiner, who's joining us in his capacity, of course, as Administrator of the United Nations Development Program. We are also joined by Vanessa Nakate. She is a youth activist and a founder of the Rise Up movement. And of course, on the stage right now, you're also seeing His Excellency John Kerry, Special Presidential Envoy for Climate for the United States. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here with us today. Commissioner, I'm going to start off the conversation by coming to you. We know that we need urgent, wide system transformation, especially in the context of high-impact sectors, if we're really going to accelerate and if we're really going to shift towards more sustainable consumption and production. And this, of course, we know includes looking at the circular economy. Commissioner, the question to you is, what would be, in your view, a good way to enhance the dialogue on sustainable consumption and production, and to do this globally, but also to do this institutionally?
Very well, thank you very much. And of course, good afternoon to everyone. And I'm very glad to be actually discussing such an important topic with you today. So first of all, I think we should refer at the findings of the International Resource Panel, which says very clearly that extraction and processing of resources is a 1/3 of the pollution. It's half of the emissions, and it's 90% behind the biodiversity loss. So this is clearly a big issue. And of course, the transformative shift that can be achieved can be done through a sustainable consumption and production. And so implementation of SDG 12 is crucial here. And to be honest, also the findings of Sustainable Development Report shows that so far SDG 12 did not get the attention it really deserves. Now, speaking about the solutions, of course, circular economy must be at the heart of the change. Because circular economy can give us an opportunity to change the business as usual approach. So basically decoupling resources extraction and processes from the growth. And through the circular economy, why I see that it's very well accepted by policymakers, by society, by businesses, because it really covers all the major areas. So, of course, first of all, it creates new jobs, new opportunities, very, very local ones. And it, of course, creates growth. Secondly, you keep the resources longer in your economy, as long as possible. So you are less dependent on supply chains, on value chains, which we saw with COVID, and now with war in Ukraine, it's the supply and value chains is really under big pressure. So you are less dependent. And third, of course, what's very important, it's of course decreases the pressure on biodiversity, because you don't need to extract resources as much. So therefore, I think it's an important path to follow.
Yeah.
I'm happy that within the EU we have adopted now a sustainable product policy, which we will look through the whole cycle of the product, from the design stage, which is usually the most important one, and where the goods are already pre-designed with certain outcomes. Then, of course, production, use, and then what happens afterwards. So, you know, speaking about the good outcomes of this leadership dialogue, it has to end with ideally with something concrete. Yeah. So of course, recommendations first of all would be already a great start. So first of all, recommendation on sustainable supply and value chain. Secondly, of course, addressing resource efficiency, circular economy, sustainable production and consumption at the core. But last but not least, okay.
Go ahead.
Last but not, yeah?
Let's try again, Commissioner.
Okay, last but...
Can I get a new microphone, please, for the Commissioner? Maybe the handheld on this end? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Last but not least, of course, the greatest outcome should be establishing a international forum or a dialogue, which would be, you know, consistent, which we could meet, discuss, and address the challenges. Because going to different regions, meeting colleagues, ministers from different parts of the world, I see that circular economy really has its place everywhere, and everyone is keen to implement. It requires a lot of knowledge sharing. It requires a lot of effort and resources, but that can solve many issues. One of the first one is, of course, waste issue. Yeah. So I think we have a great solution here, and I hope that, you know, this leadership dialogue will end with a concrete outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. So a clear call to action, and what I've heard the Commissioner saying is that recommendations are a good place to start, but they're certainly not where we just want to end. And you've also said, Commissioner, that it is an opportunity for us to move away from business as usual. So, Professor, as I come to you, you are coming into this conversation with over 20 years of experience in the UN system, in a lot of global multi-religious collaborations, in gender issues, in governance issues, in human rights. So let's bring this idea of moving away from business as usual when it comes to the importance of ethics and values, because we know that these have been identified as absolutely key to a healthy planet and responsibility. The question is, how can we then drive the required transformation in terms of ethics and values so that we can really deliver on the promise of Stockholm+50?
First of all, I hope you can all hear me. Yes, you can. It's not done. It's not giving me the signal to stop yet. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. I don't take this lightly. I'm very grateful for this opportunity. I just wanted to let you know that I think what we need most isn't just ethics and values. It is fundamental, phenomenal change in attitudes and behaviors of humans. all kinds of humans. And the only way that that has happened, as multiple research all over the world shows, if we needed the evidence, is when faith leaders become actively engaged and involved in spreading the right messages to their communities. Faith institutions, and by the way, that also includes our indigenous brothers and sisters. When faith leaders and their institutions become involved in any initiative, that is an unparalleled platform to hundreds of millions of people on a daily basis. No secular government and no secular entity, no matter how wide its ambit, can actually parallel the power of faith leaders, institutions, and communities. The challenge is not that secular actors do not see the value of ethics, and for heaven's sake, we have the United Nations, we have so many intergovernmental fora, all based on ethics and values and principles. It isn't that we don't see or have these values and principles. We may not exercise them terribly well, but it is the fact that when we do understand that faith actors are the key initiators, implementers, realizers of human behavior and human attitudes, when we do reach out to them, we often tend to do so in rather warped ways. Faith actors and faith leaders in particular are fully aware of their power. They don't need to be told how much power they have and how incredibly widespread their basic social services to the rest of the world, and how much they are the first responders in humanitarian crises, of which we were getting many. They don't need to be told any of this. What they need is to be brought together, convened and resourced to work together and to be held accountable to the promises and the exemplary work that they should be doing. It isn't that faith actors equals all good stuff. We all know that some faith actors are anything but good stuff. But it is that they have to be engaged together in a way with other civil society actors, because civil society is a deeply threatened species along with our climate. And it is important that these actors are working together and are held accountable to what they profess they will do, but they must also be resourced equitably.
So two key words I'm hearing is working together, so collaboration, but also interconnected and held accountable. You started, Professor Karam, by saying that it is about reimagining behavior. So I want to come to the question of behavior, Mrs. Stein, and I want to say that one of the things, of course, is that there's a big question about the trust deficits that we're seeing across society. In your view, what needs to be true from a multilateralism perspective in order to rebuild and to restore trust 50 years from here on?
Well, thank you, Nasiba, for a tough question. I think watching the opening this morning and being reminded of how nations came together in 1972 when they were invited to Stockholm tells you a lot about both that sense of concern whether a global meeting would essentially create a fair platform on which very unequal partners would come together. Large and small countries, countries with a highly industrialized economy, countries that had just begun industrialization. Remember, 1972 was the era of pollution. To many developing countries, that wasn't their number one concern, and yet in many developed nations, it had become a major political issue. So I think trust, in part, is when also multilateralism is able to create a fair platform on which nations with very different responsibilities, but also very different means to respond, come together to negotiate. And that, I think, also extends to the fact that every nation has a right to be heard. One of the things that the United Nations in its General Assembly Hall, I think, represents and creates trust in this idea of the United Nations, even if we stumble every day, is that every country, however large or small, has the right to be heard. It sits in that General Assembly Hall. And in fact, in Rio +20, rather 2012, we saw that extended to one of the babies of 1972. The United Nations Environment Programme finally got the other universal membership assembly in the United Nations, the United Nations Environment Assembly. I think these are steps that create trust in processes that bring very unequal partners together to then also achieve something. The second test clearly has to be, it cannot only be a talk shop.
Yeah.
I think every one of us here in Stockholm knows that we are under immense scrutiny,
Yeah.
whether we're having a talk fest here or whether we're building on 50 years of visionary, courageous environmental action that hasn't taken us to the finishing line. So what is it that makes trust grow? Well, if you're effective. So we heard this morning about the Montreal Protocol. Isn't that a remarkable example of universal agreement, industry, science, nations actually embarking on the first ever planetary repair job and pulling it off? That is effective. That creates trust. Now, to our public right now, as we sit here in the year 2022, I think we are struggling to retain that trust, both in terms of our nations behaving badly,
Yeah.
and secondly, are we actually able to craft agreements that take us back to where science has been telling us we need to be? Thank you.
Mr. Steiner, so you're imploring on us to go back to the possibility of the conversational space and how inclusive it is, but also what you're saying is not another talk shop, not another talk fest, and so building on Commissioner's earlier contribution to say it's got to be more than recommendations, it's got to be more action coming through. Vanessa, let's bring your voice into this conversation, deeply inspired by the work that you're doing in Uganda, in particular in Kampala, knowing that you have become a really big activist for climate, especially following the droughts in your own hometown. So Vanessa, having emerged as a voice of conscience, if I can describe you as such, for intergenerational responsibility, for social equity, as well as for climate justice, in practical terms, what kind of indicators do you think that we need to set up here at Stockholm+50 so that we can really know if we are on track and we're able to track that progress against those indicators? What would you say we need to put in place?
Thank you very much. First of all, we must be honest that presented with the best available science over and over again, our leaders have denied and then delayed and for decades shown a cowardly lack of leadership to take action to meet the climate crisis. If this generation of leaders does not act now, and if it doesn't act fast, it will be handing the next generation a world that is broken, a world that is ravaged, and in many places becoming unlivable. So on climate change, I see three main markers that need to be planted here at Stockholm+50. Stockholm+50 needs to be the moment all leaders agree to acknowledge what the IPCC has said, that in order to keep the promise of the Paris Agreement and avoid the worst impacts of the climate crisis, we must have no new fossil fuels. And let's be very clear, that means coal, and let's be very clear, that means coal, that means oil, and that means gas. The UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has called the idea of investing in new fossil fuels moral and economic madness. I hope every leader would agree with him. The second thing, Stockholm+50 needs to be the moment where the global north, and in particular the IMF and the multilateral banks, need to make good on promises and massively scale up funding to help the global south choose clean energy over dirty energy. And this funding must come in the form of grants, not loans with high interest rates. The global north has profited from fossil fuels. It should not now profit from the misery of the global south, who did not create this crisis and whose communities like mine are struggling to survive the worst impacts of the climate crisis. And finally, Stockholm+50 needs to be the point at which leaders agree to acknowledge the need for a loss and damage fund. And by COP27, they must begin to put real money into this fund to help those countries, those communities which have done the least to cause the climate crisis, but who are suffering the worst impacts. And just on loss and damage, I would like to welcome the recent G7 announcement. And of course, the United States are a big part of this, where the leaders have recognized for the first time the need to provide vulnerable countries like mine with additional financial aid to cope with the loss and damage that is caused by global warming. So I want to thank you for this commitment, Mr. Kerry, and all the countries within the G7. We trust that all the countries, the United States, will be able to support the communities that are on the front lines of the climate crisis. We need countries like the United States to step up and contribute and put real money in place for loss and damage as we head towards COP27.
Vanessa, thank you. Vanessa, thank you so much. And again, practical, tangible, clear about what needs to be done, markers that we can track, indicators that will help us know whether we're making progress or not. Mr. Kerry, my final question to you. I want to come back to this theme of trust and the deficit of trust that we're seeing across many levels. In your role as a global climate champion, what are the key levers of change that you think we could be pulling on to really address the trust deficit, especially in the context of the intertwined crises of planet and society that we are confronted with today?
Well, there's only one way to address the trust issue, and that's to get the job done. Very simple. And we're not yet. Vanessa is absolutely correct about her judgment that the developed world, 20 major economies, equal 80% of all the emissions. And the reality is that the science is telling us very clearly what we have to do. This is not a matter of politics, ideology, liberal, left, right, conservative, whatever. This is a matter of mathematics and physics. And right now, Vanessa is absolutely correct in saying that the leaders of the world and anybody in many of the people in positions of highest responsibility who could make the difference are indifferent to the math and to the physics. And what we have to do is summon a willingness to break the mold, to get out of this fixation by with the status quo, where a whole bunch of people in the world are just drifting along, ignoring the science, ignoring common sense, ignoring the facts, and ignoring the reality of what's happening to the planet. And so we're on a, sadly, very destructive course with huge percentage of biodiversity being destroyed, massive numbers of acres of forest around the world being destroyed, something like 70 million acres a year, living about as unsustainably as you could conceivably live, and ignoring the reality that the scientists have told us, they told us 4 years ago, you have 12 years within which to make the key decisions to avoid the worst consequences of the climate crisis. They didn't say to avoid the crisis.
Yep.
They said to avoid the worst consequences. And here we are 4 years later. Coal use went up 9% last year. Emissions went up 6% last year. And unless we get serious about it, I mean really serious, about accelerating the rate of this transition, which, by the way, is a huge economic winner. It's not a loser to clean up the air where 15 million people are dying every single year of the quality of the air, or to make it less hot on the planet, where 5 million people a year are already dying of extreme heat. It's not so radical to say to people, hey, we should be breathing cleaner air, have less cancer, send less children to the hospital for environmentally induced asthma. But we're not choosing to do that. We're not choosing to do a whole bunch of things that make common sense. And the sadness is, I mean, you know, we're avoiding the potential of this massive new marketplace, which could be circular, which could become sustainable, which could make a whole bunch of better choices for people. And the worst of it all is Ukraine is now being used as an excuse by people who prefer the status quo over the transition, who are unwilling to recognize that Ukraine is not, if anything, Ukraine is a message to all of us. This is why you should be energy independent and not allow a petro dictator to hold you hostage because you're so dependent on their fossil fuel. If we began to transition more with respect to the renewable technologies that are available today, and I'll lay you odds, most of the countries out here, sitting there, even if they're dependent on coal today, all the more reason to be moving to a renewable grid, which would accelerate the marketplace for that renewable and begin to get away from the dangers that we're facing. But we're simply not moving. Vanessa's correct. We're just not. The leaders of the world have not earned the trust of people around the world yet, because they're not making the choices that make common sense and that avoid our indifferently and inadvertently drifting in to a suicide pact by indifference. Sure. And so we have to change that. And the only way to change it is to begin to deploy the technologies we have today, which the IEA has made very clear are sufficient to be able to achieve a 45% minimum reduction over the next 8 years. That will allow time for the conversion to some of the newer technologies, whether it's green hydrogen, battery storage, direct air carbon capture. I went to California recently and met with 15 startups. It is remarkable what people are doing, and venture capital is beginning to move in that direction. Yeah. So if the world were to move more aggressively and authoritatively in the direction that we know we have to, that will begin to earn trust, and equally importantly, if not more importantly, it'll change the dynamics on the planet for the better, and we begin to win this battle, not lose it.
And we begin to win this battle and not lose it. And you started off, Mr. Kerry, by saying the way we rebuild trust is to get the job done. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do right now is I'm going to ask our panelists, having shared with us some of their opening remarks, to now adopt a listening posture. I'm going to come off the stage and I'm going to really mine the floor with some contributions from some national statements, some statements from UN system stakeholders, and then I'm going to come back to my panelists and ask you to reflect and to react to some of the contributions coming from the floor. I think Vanessa's key words that she started off with, she said, we denied and we delayed, and this is an opportunity for us to deviate from that. I do know that the Commissioner needs to leave us at this moment, so could we kindly please give him a round of applause as he departs and I come down the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to start off with Her Excellency Teresa Ribera, the Vice President and Minister for the Ecological Transition and the Democratic Challenge of the Kingdom of Spain. Madame, you have the floor. And as Madame begins to speak, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, let me bring your attention to the fact that we are going to have the timers live on the screen. And so I'm kindly requesting that we please keep to the allocated 2 minutes throughout our proceedings today. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. I would like to recall some of the things that have been mentioned by the panel. 7 million premature deaths per year as a result of the air we are breathing. Deaths due to malnutrition as a result of drought. Loss due to floods. It is not a coincidence that we are talking about health of the planet and of our people. And This means that we need to work on the quality of our environment for prosperity. And I believe it is very important to look at how to strengthen coherent responses to biodiversity, the prosperity of people, and social inclusion. This means that we need to invest in science, invest in people, invest in innovation and social innovation as well, knowledge and outreach, as well as regulation. And unfortunately, we do not have regulation or any unions for this prosperity and progress. Neither do we have an education system, an outreach system that is transparent for responsible citizenry and to ensure that the decisions of economic investment, public and private, do not waste the money. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, thank you very much. An emphasis on investment. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I'm making my way to Her Excellency Sherry Rehman, who is sitting to my left. Of course, the Federal Minister of Pakistan, on behalf of the Group of 77 and China. Your Excellency, you have the floor. Might I please ask the technical team to please put up the timers on the screen as requested. Please go ahead, Madam.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. Ladies and gentlemen, shorten the statement, but here it is. Tonight we have met to commemorate this great moment, and now let me make the statement on behalf of the G77 and China. Excellencies, it is obvious that we must take urgent actions today for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity and the fight against climate change. We need to turn the tide on deforestation, land degradation, and pollution, and restore balance with our natural ecosystems and foster innovative business models and technologies that contribute to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. As governments and their partners in the public and private sectors work to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, we can seize this opportunity to achieve a sustainable, inclusive and resilient recovery. Many commitments have already been made, ladies and gentlemen, for financial and technological support to the developing countries. We must ensure that these are effectively fulfilled and that the ongoing negotiations, such as the adoption of a post-2020 global biodiversity framework, are successful. We need a post-2020 framework that promotes the conservation of biodiversity, its sustainable use, and the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising out of the utilization of genetic resources. But in particular, we need a framework that includes a substantial increase in finance, capacity building, and technology transfer for implementation in developing countries. Let us demonstrate our vision, leadership and commitment to improve our relationship with nature and place our commitment to conserve, restore and sustainably use biodiversity to address climate change at the heart of sustainable development policies. We believe it is the time to accelerate actions to put nature on a path to recovery by 2030 to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. We also must put the environment as a whole, be it biodiversity, the ocean, the climate, at the center of our COVID-19 recovery strategies. Science, technology, and capacity building can support such transformation to sustainable and resilient recovery. Finally, the group also believes that discussion outside the existing multilaterally agreed frameworks and conventions must not undermine the work and negotiations under these frameworks. I thank you for your patience. Thank you.
Your Excellency, thank you very much. Biodiversity and the environment broadly at the center of all economic strategies. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm making my way to Her Excellency Filda Nani Kiring, the Minister of Environment, Natural Resources, Conservation and Tourism of Botswana. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
I thank you very much. I want to pick from what our young people have said about including young people. I would say that for a long time, they have not been included. So national governments need to put put attention to ensuring that policies and laws and programs, sustainable development programs, are actually inclusive, including young people as beneficiaries, as benefactors, and also as drivers of change. So we need those programs. In Botswana, we have the community-based natural resource management program, where our communities that live in these biodiversity-rich areas can benefit. They benefit from the hunting program, from the wildlife, from the forests, and we make sure that as they derive benefits, then they are key in protecting these forests. So unless we are able to make sure that there are benefits that the communities get, then biodiversity loss will continue to be a problem. So we are looking at transformational policies that are inclusive, and also we have reserved in Botswana 40% of our surface land area is protected areas, game reserves, national parks, wildlife management areas. By doing so, the government is the one that is key in developing policies and programs and managing and controlling by laws and actually programs and statutes so that we are able to keep this forest for a long time. The access and benefit sharing bill is on the cards right now at Cabinet, where we are going to ensure that indigenous knowledge of these communities, how did they keep these forests until we have them now 50 years on? And we cannot afford to exclude our communities as key protectors of our biodiversity resources, I think.
Your Excellency, thank you very much. The inclusion of young people, communities at the center. Distinguished guests, we're making our way to the distinguished representative of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. The floor is yours, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. The good news is that governments globally have prudently estimated 1.5 trillion to invest in the change to a sustainable economy. 1 trillion prudent estimate of subsidies for fossil fuels, $500 billion a year prudent estimation of subsidies harmful to biodiversity in agriculture. Spending 1.5 trillion a year supporting workers and industries to produce new and better technologies. 1.5 trillion to be invested with farmers to build a new sustainable agriculture. 1.5 trillion to be invested in nature, supporting nature-based solutions for all the problems we have. We have the means. We need the political will to make this change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. We have the means, we need the political will to make the change. Distinguished guests, I'm going to UN Habitat. Distinguished representative, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I wish to thank our hosts, Canada and Ecuador, who have been long champions of sustainable urbanization. In 1972, Canada had the foresight to insist that the natural and built environment constitute a singular and indivisible ecosystem. And Canada went on to host the first Habitat Conference in Vancouver in 1976. 40 years later, Ecuador hosted Habitat 3 in Quito and gave us the blueprint to achieve sustainable urbanization, the new urban agenda. And our 50-year journey from Stockholm 72 started with adequate housing to better governance and through the new urban agenda to the realization of cities as multi-level system. A system can effectively tackle the four confluence of Cs, that is COVID-19, climate, conflict, and capital. In the case of climate, the built stock of our cities and towns will double by 2050. This means we are about to build all the housing stock in all human history in 3 decades. Whether we meet the 4 planetary crises head-on depends on quality of what we build and how we build and with what material. Short-term material gains is depriving future generations of an equitable future. Development models increasingly promote sprawl, segregation, and privatization. These relegate many of urban poor to informal settlement. We are living beyond planetary means. We must find our way back to urbanize in harmony with nature. We must recognize that it is fully within our power to change. When done right, cities can decouple growth from environmental impact. Do things right offers many synergies. Curbing sprawl not only conserves the natural habitat, but also reduces the transmission of deadly diseases. Shifting commuters from cars to public transit not only reduces emission, but also improves air quality and public health. Do things at scale, like during the COVID-19 pandemic, with the provision of basic services is a must be the new normal. The neighborhood inclusive city essential for the sake of climate, other species, and ourselves. Cities cannot do it alone. National policies, international agendas need to promote healthy urban system and dynamics. Governments at all levels needs to work together to eliminate the further subsidies. And financial institutions needs to de-risk innovative green infrastructure. With your help, better cities can help us achieve the world we need, provided we act now and act our talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam. We have to act now and we have to walk our talk. Ladies and gentlemen, it has come to my attention that Mr. Kerry does have to leave us at this moment. Can we give him a round of applause for his contributions, please? Thank you very much. But he's got one more thing to say. Please go ahead.
I'm sorry, I wanted to leave everybody with what I think is at least a key thought, if I may.
Go ahead.
In Glasgow, we succeeded in getting 65% of global GDP committed to keep 1.5 degrees alive. That's a remarkable step. And they are legitimate plans that could keep 1.5 degrees alive if they're implemented. That means also that 35% did not join that. If I just said that 20 countries equal 80% of all the emissions, my friends, there are some big developed countries in those 20 countries and developing countries. We can't do this alone. If the 65% went to zero tomorrow, you still have a crisis. You have to get everybody reducing what they can. We cannot be in a trajectory where large nations are going to be going up in emissions while others are trying to go down. It just doesn't balance out. It doesn't work in the mathematics or the physics. So we have to change the dialogue a little bit. We can't go back to what we left in Paris, which was leaving behind this terrible struggle between developed and developing. Though there are legitimate complaints, obviously, by all the developing countries, because they didn't create this problem. That's why I focus on the 20. What the 20 do will decide what happens to the planet. But among those 20, we've got to have everybody moving in the same direction. That's the only way we can achieve net zero. If you don't do enough during 2020 to 2030, it is impossible to reach net zero by 2050, physically, mathematically. Therefore, that's our struggle. And we have to keep focused on the reality of what is going to make the difference. If we do enough between 2020 and 2030, and that requires every country to be on a different trajectory. You talk about the problem, folks. There's an old saying, if you're digging yourself a hole, the first thing you have to do to get out of it is stop digging. But we subsidized fossil fuel. We, writ large, I didn't vote for it, but it happened that fossil fuels got $2.5 trillion of subsidy over the course of the last 5 years. We're subsidizing the very problem that we're trying to get rid of. That is a definition of insanity. So what we have to do is listen to the math, look at where we have to go, and move in a direction where all of those 20 nations are making best efforts. Not every country should be required to do the same thing. That's common but differentiated. But every country must be required to do something to begin to bring in the emissions down. That's the only way we win this battle. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, John Kerry, we have to go back to doing the maths. We have to go back and consult the physics, and we have to go back and start a different conversation. We're building on this conversation right now, and I'm going to go to the distinguished representative for the Worldwide Fund for Nature, and to give the representative the opportunity to please address the floor for 2 minutes, please.
The pound is over here.
Thank you very much, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. So, ladies and gentlemen, the loss of nature today is not any longer just a moral or an ecological issue. It's actually an issue that we're beginning to understand affects our economy, our social stability, our health, our well-being. In other words, it's a security issue for humanity. We're beginning finally to understand, after decades of taking nature for granted, that actually nature contributions to humanity are huge and existential. But climate change and nature loss are beginning to undermine the ability of nature to contribute to our society. So on climate, we have a clear direction and destination of journey. Carbon neutral, net zero emissions by 2050. Crystal clear, time-bound, measurable. On nature, we need the same clarity. But on nature, net zero is not enough because we have lost so much, and nature has the amazing ability to bounce back if we give it a chance. Restoration has to be included in a global goal for nature. And so a global goal for nature has to be a nature positive, a net positive biodiversity by 2030. A global goal that will then inspire a global plan, and a global plan that then will inspire local action at scale, local action that will deliver the ambition needed to hold and reverse nature loss by 2030. Nature positive, in simple words, means more nature by the end of the decade. We need to leave to our children more nature at the end of the decade, none less. More forest, more fish in the ocean and rivers, more pollinator in the countryside, more biodiversity in the soil, etc., etc. We have the opportunity to codify, to embrace, to align the whole of society, the whole world, around a nature-positive global goal, and the forthcoming Convention on Biological Diversity, to make it the Paris Agreement for nature, the agreement that will be remembered as codifying a common direction to halt and reverse nature loss by 2030, nature-positive by the end of the decade. We need leadership, corporate, governments, civil society, but leadership to focus on what's necessary, what science is telling us is necessary to build a safe future for humanity. Because at the end of the day, this is what simply at stake. So we hope we all align and embrace a nature-positive goal that together with carbon neutrality can represent a double compass for our sustainability journey. Thank you.
Distinguished guests, a double compass for our sustainability journey, leaving more nature for our children and their children's children. We now move on to His Excellency Rauf Hajiev, the Vice Minister of
Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, today we are commemorating the 1972 United Nations Conference on the Human Environment. Over 5 decades, degradation of environment posed limits to well-being and prosperity, creating obstacles to a better future and our ability to achieve sustainable development. If we maintain the current patterns of interaction with nature and do not take bold action and engagement on climate change and environmental protection, we will face heightened risks of future degradation of nature. Clean, healthy and sustainable environment is important for the enjoyment of human rights and for sustainable development in all its dimensions. The well-being of humanity depends on nature and hence our ability to sustainably use, restore and protect the ecosystem. Protection of environment has always been a priority in our country. Azerbaijan is a party to more than 20 international environmental conventions and actively participates in various environmental initiatives. Moreover, a number of significant strategic documents on environmental protection has been endorsed so far. Recently, Azerbaijan 2030 national priorities for socio-economic development has been approved. Clean environment and green growth are the priorities out of total 5 for the next decade. As a result of climate change, our water resources have decreased by 15% over recent decades. A growing water shortage causes high vulnerability in agriculture and other sectors. In order to ensure resilience to the hazardous hydrometeorological events, we have established a modern system of early warning. I would like to emphasize that liberation of our territories after almost 30-year occupation provides new opportunities for mitigation and reducing the impact of climate change. The rehabilitation of these territories includes the application of smart city and smart village approaches, as well as the creation of green zone will directly contribute to mitigation initiatives. Azerbaijan set target to increase the share of renewable energy in power generation up to 30% by 2030, despite long history of oil and gas industry development. We are promoting the conservation and sustainable use and management of natural resources through resource efficiency and circular economy policy approaches by enhancing and supporting recycling practices and introducing green growth targets in the country. Dear colleagues, we call upon to strengthen international cooperation, act responsibly on transboundary issues such as conservation of water basins, biodiversity and forests. We should use every opportunity which may lead to development of regional interaction. In these challenging times for all of us, I wish you every success in efforts to protect the environment. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Distinguished guests, we are making our way to His Excellency Orlando Habe, the Minister of Sustainable Development, Climate Change and Disaster Risk Management of Belize. Over to you, please, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. Not to speak on my prepared talk, but just to respond, maybe to contribute to what one of the panelists, or maybe more than one of the panelists, had alluded to. And one of the issues that was brought forth was the issue of trust. But I wanted to speak of not only the commitments of trust, not only the commitments for finance or for reducing emissions on the use of fossil fuels, but in not sending by those first world countries, by sales or grants or gifts to developing countries, those products that are damaging to the environment, to the biodiversity, to human health, for example, those hazardous chemicals and pesticides. Also in the issue of sustainable consumption and production and the circular economy, this has to be viewed from the fact that it cannot be designed, it has to be designed for all, both industrialized countries and developing countries. It cannot be designed to bring progress for the first world countries only. Assistance has to commence now for technology, especially, and capacity building. Also, another thing that we have put on the back burner for too long, we have not put much emphasis on trade in regard to curbing climate change effects, biodiversity loss, pollution, and waste. Importing countries have aesthetic standards that are far more restrictive than quality and sanitary standards. This creates overproduction with large amounts of wasted products by producing countries at a great loss of finance, the land degradation that comes with it, the biodiversity loss. So where is the WTO on this? Thank you.
Distinguished guests, where is the WTO on this? We're moving on now to Her Excellency Zakia Katabi, who is, of course, the Federal Minister for Climate, Environment, Sustainable Development, and the Green Deal of Belgium. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I will speak in French. Alors, d'autres avant moi l'ont dit.
As previous speakers said, every day, millions of people are coming up against the harsh reality of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. And unless we take action, their numbers are going to rise. However, for some time, we've been aware about what needs to be done. And as time goes on, we're increasingly aware of how to do this. Therefore, there can be no more excuses to justify inaction. I wanted to highlight a point that hasn't been the center of our attention so far, and that is the method. In order to take credible, effective action to tackle the challenges we're facing, we need to break down silos. Confronting these challenges in a more comprehensive manner, because all of these crises feed into each other, and they have common origins. We need to focus on nature, ecosystem approaches. They're excellent, and therefore we commend the UNED agreement on the framework for nature-based solutions. However, we need to be pragmatic. We have neither the time nor the financial resources to tackle these crises one by one in isolation. I'm also concerned by the fact that the COP15 of the CBD is being postponed owing to the pandemic. We hope that this will not prevent the adoption of the post-2022 biodiversity framework. This is a pressing need if we are to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Therefore, I urge all parties to work hand in hand to ensure that 15.2 of the CBD takes place this year, so that we take forward this important process, bolstering its impact. Regarding the IPCC conclusions, once again, we heard an unequivocal message. There is a climate crisis. We're seeing the negative repercussions of all of these phenomena on people and planet. We therefore need to accelerate implementation of mitigating measures. However, we need a multidisciplinary approach, taking the long view. We need more solidarity and cooperation. We need to swiftly implement all components of the Glasgow Agreement. In addition, we should also rethink our consumption and production patterns, moving to a circular economy. As the Secretary already told us, we need to also move to sustainable systems. That's a major challenge. We need sustainable consumption and production systems, as well as sustainable food systems. That's the only way for us to hit those SDGs. The European Plan for a Circular Economy, specifically sustainable products, that initiative the Commissioner mentioned, that is, of course, something on the positive side of the ledger. Also, the work on plastics pollution is something I'd like to hail. Belgium will continue contributing to that very ambitious process. Now, there are some anniversaries we'd prefer not to have to celebrate. 50 years have gone by since we first met here. I call on each and every one of you to remain optimistic and to demonstrate that, yes, 50 years old is the age of reason and that we finally understood that.
Attention to the method, to the how, to break the silos, to work more deliberately, collaboratively, to work more deliberately, picking up on the interconnections. And so with that, distinguished guests, I'm making my way to His Excellency, who I'm finding right here. Thank you very much. Zach Goldsmith, who is, of course, the Minister of State for the Environment and the Pacific at the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs and the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office of the United Kingdom. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the panel for that fascinating discussion earlier. It's been half a century since the world first came here to Stockholm, and undoubtedly a huge amount has happened since then, and some of it has been fantastic for the environment. But we've got to be honest and acknowledge that most of the trends, almost all of the trends, are heading in the wrong direction, some of them very rapidly. The good news is that we know that we can turn things around. We know we can do that because there is huge demand around the world for change, not least from so many young people. We have the knowledge, we have the tools that we need in order to do so, and because all around the world there are pockets of truly inspiring leadership that show us not only that given half a chance nature can recover, but it
can help us tackle so many other problems at the same time: hunger, poverty, pollution, even pandemics, as well as both the causes and the impacts of climate change. And that's why, as COP26 presidents, we brought nature from the margins of the debate to the heart of our response. But our job now, as has already been acknowledged, is to do everything we can to ensure those commitments are honoured in full and that we build upon them. And a big part of that will be working towards and at COP15, the CBD COP, where the world really has to agree an ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework, one that puts us, as WWF has said, on track for a nature-positive world this decade, targets to protect at least 30% of the world's land and 30% of the world's ocean by the end of the decade, targets to see ecosystems restored, species, population sizes recovering, human-caused extinctions halted, and crucially, mechanisms that will enable us to hold countries to account, enable civil society to hold countries to account. We really do need this to be the Paris moment for nature, and knowing everything we do, anything less will be unforgivable. And to secure this, we need, in particular, the richer countries to show that we're serious about finance. And that's why here in Stockholm, the Leaders' Pledge for Nature supported an event dedicated to finance for nature, scaling up investment from all sources, public, philanthropic, private, using every lever we have to ensure that the market recognizes the true value of the natural world and that pollution, degradation, waste become an unbearable liability, shifting those perverse subsidies we've already been hearing about. Public money used to support, not degrade, the public good. And it's a huge challenge, but it's an unavoidable one. People, particularly young people, are despairing of a future. They feel they have no power to change. They hear the declarations. They see little in terms of action. And the trust now between people and power is fragile to the point of breaking. So we really have to redouble our efforts, work together in good faith, make good on our promises, and make this the year that we finally begin to mend our relationship with the natural world. Thank you.
Make this the year and the moment where we finally begin to mend our relationship with nature, with the planet right now. And anything less, to quote His Excellency, would be unforgivable. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, over now to the speaker, the distinguished representative of the International Chamber of Commerce. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you. As permanent observers to the UN General Assembly, the official UNFCCC focal point for business and industry, and as a key business interlocutor for biodiversity and UN environment discussions, ICC, together with its members, brings the voice of the real economy to these discussions, one that will help shape our common and future and our common agenda together. Specifically, the business community globally recognizes the escalating environmental crises and stands squarely behind our shared goals and action. Business is leading and driving investment, innovation, and action needed to limit global temperature increases to 1.5 degrees C and ensuring a nature-positive and pollution-free future. More businesses and companies than ever before have committed themselves to achieving net zero, and many, many more are already placing sustainability at the heart of their business strategies, their investments, and their operations. And increasingly, this isn't just the case for large multinationals and global corporates. This is also the case for small and medium-sized enterprises around the world. So what business is now doing is making sure it's designing and implementing strategies in a way that aligns not just with economic considerations, but also with environmental and social ones as well. So this is all about dialogue, this is about consultation, and it really is about the next 6 months. There's a clear opportunity to drive the global sustainability agenda through the second half of this year. And specifically, we can focus in on revised NDCs ahead of COP27. We can successfully implement market mechanisms. We can then scale up sustainable finance, both in terms of mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. We need a global, robust biodiversity framework by the end of a successful COP15, and we need to make progress on circular economy, global plastics, and moving the trade and environment agendas forward. We all have a responsibility to enable a peaceful and prosperous future for all of us and our families and children. And now more than ever, those challenges mean us working together. Let's not waste this opportunity. Thank you.
Let's not waste the opportunity, and let's not waste the second half of the year with very clear, practical opportunities still available for us to make progress. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, now to the distinguished representative from the World Health Organization. You have the floor, madam.
Thank you very much. I'm speaking on the chair of the UN Nutrition, the coordination mechanism of nutrition in the UN system, as well as WHO. First, I would like to iterate the importance of the health equity and universal access to safe and nutritious food for all, including next generations. In fact, 25% of the global disease burden is due to environment factors, and a healthy planet is needed to secure access to food for health for everyone, in line with the human rights principle. Regarding the approaches for the action, I would like to underline 3 approaches. First, One Health approach. COVID-19 reminded us that the health of humans, animals, and ecosystems are closely interlinked, and the momentum to multi-sectoral collaboration is increasing. We have to translate this willingness to concrete and sustainable action. Second, system approach. From producing and consumption and waste management, food systems need to be designed and operated with sustainable manner. And third, greener approach and action. We need to reduce the burden of the planet by less energy, produce less waste, reduce pollution, be culture sensitive, and keep biodiversity. More concretely, for example, reducing red meat consumption by those consuming more than needed, stimulating aquatic food in conjunction with local culture and local availability, or promoting the decarbonization in all sectors, including healthcare sectors around the world, which WHO is working with countries. Finally, I would like to reiterate that nature is a key provider of fundamental elements for human life and health. Planetary health is a key concept and direction to achieve SDGs. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam. And that, of course, is the speaker from the World Health Organization. Distinguished guest, returning our attention now to the distinguished representative of Earth Rights International. Over to you, please.
Thank you. Today, my message for this dialogue is clear. We will not achieve a healthy planet unless the human rights impacts of the environmental and climate crisis are recognized. This includes confronting the growing violence against people who defend our rivers, lands, and natural resources. I'm from Colombia, a mega-diverse country where communities are already suffering the impacts of the climate crisis. It is also a country witnessing increasing violence against environmental defenders, a country where the price to pay to defend the environment can be your life. And unfortunately, this situation is not unique to Colombia. Looking back at the 1972 Stockholm Conference, we can see the seeds of a human rights approach to environmental protection. In the decades that follow, these seeds inspired Principle 10 of the Rio Declaration and its promise of inclusive environmental governance. However, communities today are still not properly consulted on projects that harm their health and environment. Those responsible for the climate crisis have not been held accountable. Those responsible for the violation of environmental rights rest in impunity. Around the world, environmental human rights defenders are increasingly targeted with violence, harassment, and criminalization. This is happening from the US to Peru to Myanmar, and is especially true for indigenous defenders. Most climate-damaging projects are located in indigenous territories, endangering the lives and livelihoods of already vulnerable populations. As the climate crisis worsens, so does the violence against those protecting our environment. The UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Assembly has documented the pattern of repression and silencing of opposition movements in a report presented last year to the UN General Assembly. Yet, at the UNFCCC meetings, there has been no recognition of the situation and role of environmental defenders. At COP27 of the Climate Convention, states should recognize the critical work by environmental defenders in addressing the climate crisis. Today, my call is clear. We cannot achieve a healthy planet if environmental and climate policies are not rooted in human rights. We will not achieve a healthy planet unless there is real protection of the rights of environmental defenders and communities on the front lines. Thank you.
Earth Rights International, thank you very much. Distinguished guests, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure now to give the floor to Her Excellency Alba Rosa Perez Montoya, the Minister of Science, Technology and the Environment from Cuba.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. Human activity has altered 75% of the planet's surface area, 85% of its wetlands, and 66% of its oceans. And with this, it has undermined the foundations of our own societies and our economies. Consumption-driven societies are the main reason behind the atrocious destruction of the environment. They've polluted the air, they've saturated the atmosphere with gases that alter the atmosphere. This was said by Fidel Castro during the Rio Summit in '92. 30 years later, things have worsened. To reverse this, we have to have real environmental governance changes locally, nationally, and multilaterally. We must increase our commitment to the Paris Agreement and grant access to multilateral funds for climate projects, recognizing the capacities and circumstances of developing countries. Cuba, that only represents 0.08% of global emissions of greenhouse gases, is not lagging behind. We have just created a foundation, United for Climate, and it offers its services to other countries as its contribution to technical assessment, capacity building, strengthening development, and climate action. We recommend for strong eco-innovative partnerships bringing together governments, the private sector, civil society to provide information, data, and scientific results for creation and transfer of clean technology. This will foster better application of science and innovation in an inclusive and equitable manner as a viable alternative to solve the triple planetary crisis. We have to put technology development at the service of all people in a just and collaborative manner. Let us work together for a healthy planet towards Stockholm+100. Thank you very much.
Much, Your Excellency. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm making my way very quickly now to His Excellency Jan Dušek, the Vice Minister of the Environment of the Czech Republic. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Czechoslovakia, the state where I was born, couldn't attend the 1972 UN Conference on Human Development in Stockholm because our Prague Spring was silenced by the Soviet occupation. Today, we are witnessing Russia's aggression on Ukraine, which is not only a violation of international law, but will certainly have lasting environmental consequences. Peace, rule of law, respect for human and civil rights, and promotion of sustainable development and environmental protection are indivisible. The Czech Republic is ready to contribute also as the newest member of the UN Human Rights Council. Ecological policies were among the drivers of democratic change in my country. In this spirit, Czechoslovakia initiated the process Environment for Europe in 1991, bringing together the continent to protect the environment as a precondition for dignified life. I believe we simply have to continue in spite of the immense challenges stemming from the complexity and pace of change. The cross-cutting nature of the themes of the next UNECE Environment for Europe Ministerial Conference, taking place again in October this year in Cyprus, namely sustainable infrastructure and sustainable tourism, provide an opportunity to address complex challenges through multifaceted solutions. The world has changed. We are facing biodiversity loss, climate change, and new types of pollution. We are not just hitting, but exceeding our planetary boundaries. We have all signed up to global sustainable development goals, although implementing them is difficult. Technological solutions must come together with a change in our mindsets, habits, and behavior. And if we are smart, nature can help us. The Czech Republic remains committed to a close cooperation in protecting the environment as a basic precondition for ensuring a sustainable future. In this spirit, we would like to see this landmark international gathering leading to our collective action plan to which we stand ready to contribute. Thank you.
Your Excellency, thank you very much. A technology plus a change in mindset, plus a change in behavior, plus a change in habits for the change that we're looking to see. A very big thank you to His Excellency. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Her Excellency Leah Vermeulen is taken to the floor now. Of course, the Minister of Environment in Denmark. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, colleagues, dear friends, all of us gathered here in Stockholm these days. The challenges that we face are mounting and daunting. However, I want to start with the fact that the challenges that we were discussing when I was a child, a lot of them have been solved today. So I think what we need to agree on going out of Stockholm+50 is that my children and the young people are here today, they should say the same when they meet in the years to come. So we know that global action matters, and that brings me to of course the challenges that we see and which have been shared also from the panel today. We have the 3 planetary crises, and I think it's urgent that we have more ambitious action, that we have more committed action, and that we have faster action. On biodiversity, we must agree on an ambitious global goal at the CBD COP15. We need the Paris deal for nature, and we need to agree on it this year. On climate, we must come together at the COP27 in Egypt and make the necessary commitments to ensure that we keep the 1.5 degree alive, as John Kerry also mentioned at stage. And on pollution, we must ensure a committed and effective negotiation process on the global plastic agreement that we decided upon in Nairobi at UNEA 5 in order to put an end to global plastic pollution. And we need to get there in 2024. So we are busy. But let us go out from Stockholm+50 and build that trust with the young people who are counting on us today. Let's say to them that we are engaged, that we will work even harder when we leave Stockholm this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. We will work even harder as we leave Stockholm this year. Distinguished guests, we are going to the representative from the Air Transport Action Group. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, colleagues. When delegates gathered here in Stockholm in 1972, they would have arrived from all over the world on aeroplanes which, on the surface, may look very similar to today's aircraft, but in reality were from a completely different era. The flights you took to get here would have produced at least 70% less carbon dioxide than those back in the 1970s. In addition, they would have been safer and cost passengers at least a third, opening up travel to more and more citizens around the world and giving more people the chance to see our planet. That progress, based on efficiency and innovation, allows for global connections to be built and goes far beyond our business. We support 15 out of 17 SDGs, and as evidenced by gatherings such as this, the very foundation of multilateralism, people coming together to learn from each other and to exchange knowledge and ideas. That collaboration is at the heart of how aviation functions, and it's that collaboration which allowed the air transport industry to come together last year with a pledge to get to net zero carbon emissions by 2050. This is going to be a significant challenge, but we know that working together, we can make it happen. So here are 2 very specific suggestions for government action. First, we would urge all governments to support the adoption of a long-term climate goal for air transport at the International Civil Aviation Organization Assembly this September, backing up the industry goal, helping to fulfill SDG 13, and providing a global multilateral framework for action, agreeing the means of implementation through capacity building and financing to enable a just transition for all countries will be key. Secondly, we urge all governments to explore the development of sustainable aviation fuel and green hydrogen opportunities. On the flight path to 2050, we have the chance to support more climate-friendly connectivity and transport, green energy industries in nearly every country on Earth, and up to 14 million new energy jobs worldwide. Done well, this can not only support SDGs 7 and 13, but also 1, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Together, anything is possible, and with the right guidance and collaborative effort, we can connect the world and reduce our climate impact at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Together, anything is possible. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm coming to the distinguished representative on population, health and environment from the Ethiopia Consortium. Madam, you have the floor.
All right. Thank you. I'm honored to be speaking on behalf of Women's Major Group. As stated in the background paper for this session, we need clear strategies and mechanisms for realization of inclusive, multi-sectoral, integrated, and gender-just, right-based approach in environmental governance. In this regard, we'd like to make 3 action points. First, one of the main obstacles hampering women's participation as active agents in environmental governance is the societal structures that keep them away from the decision-making process. In order for women to be decision makers on environmental governance, they should be able to decide over their own bodies. Bodily autonomy is essential. 218 million women and girls in low and middle income countries are deprived of the rights to make decisions over their sexual and reproductive health. Women should have access to the information and service that allows them to choose if and when to have children. We, therefore, call on all actors to integrate SRHR into environmental programming. Secondly, there cannot be healthy people on a polluted planet. Pollution particularly impacts women and children. All actors need to ensure environmental health by phasing out toxic chemicals and plastic waste. We, therefore, call on actions to urgently materialize the global treaty to end plastic pollution. Last, but certainly not least, the brutal human rights violations playing out due to wars and affecting the most vulnerable and deprive them of their human rights to a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. We urge all parties to find diplomatic solutions to the ongoing conflicts and wars. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Again, women and children at the center. It has been brought to my attention, Mr. Kim Steiner does need to leave us, but I would like to give you, sir, an opportunity just to maybe share any reaction from what you've heard on the floors before you depart from the stage. Perhaps just a minute.
Thank you, Nasifa. I think listening to each other is always the best starting point in understanding how we help each other. I think one of the things that I have come to appreciate about those who adhere to the principles of multilateralism is that it's, in the first instance, not a license to tell others what to do, but to perhaps ask the other, how can I support you in doing something that helps us both to move forward together? You know, we will hear a lot here in Stockholm about the progress that we have made, but also how in some ways we are failing to progress. And even this afternoon, it is stunning to me sometimes to think, what on earth is wrong with us? We have the technologies, we have the means, we have even the money in our world to be able to move forward, and yet we seem to unable sometimes to come together. So my appeal to all of you would be, let us go back to our respective countries and communities and begin to think about how we lead, because in history things have changed not by waiting for others to lead, but by actually leading by example. And that is how you create a movement, and that is how you ultimately finally get to the point where we don't have to regret time and again missing the targets that we have set for ourselves. I think that is hopefully one part of what we can take away from here. Thank you.
Mr. Kim Steiner, ladies and gentlemen, let's give him a round of applause as he departs. Thank you very much. It's a very clear clarion call. How am I leading and how is my leadership impacting the planet and prosperity for all? We're almost at the end of this round of contributions from the floor before I make my way back to Professor as well as Vanessa for what they've heard. But before we do that, allow me to come to His Excellency Orlando Jorge Mera, the Minister of Environment and Natural Resources of the Dominican Republic.
I'll be giving the statement on behalf of Mr. Orlando Jorge Mera and Milagros de Camps, Deputy Minister of Environment of the Dominican Republic. Excelencias, colegas.
Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the IPCC has been clear on the NDCs that are currently on the table and where we are in terms of the ambition and the implementation of NDCs as pertains to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The conclusion is that what we are doing is inadequate to safeguard our planet as we know it. This is a death sentence for many islands and for others that feel the impact more. We have to do more, and we have to do it soon. It is important to ensure efficient financing and qualitative financing, especially for adaptation, that to date remains insufficient. Accessible financing should be at the forefront for ambitious actions in the developing country, especially through subsidies and not through debt. We need a solid financing plan, not an adaptation plan, because we have to have our own rights to look at how we will transfer risk, consolidate finances, and to have systematic support, because we do not want to be experimenting all the time. As for carbon markets that have been pushing for adequacy in order to stabilize the planet's temperature to 1.5, we consider the costs. This has to be green, a green transition, but it has to be just as well. In order for us to have this, the ILO has said that 80% of the new jobs that have been created are in men-dominated sectors and that have been created in places that women cannot participate. 50% in science and technology, the students, are women. Women are not benefiting from employment opportunities. We have to deal with gender inequalities in the labor market and in the decarbonization areas such as agriculture, industry, among others. In conclusion, the end to the subsidies to polluting industries have to stop. We have to respond to the necessities of the most vulnerable, especially in terms of financing, because this will be the key. Thank you.
Your Excellency, distinguished guests, I'm making my way swiftly now to His Excellency Erkki Savisaar, the Minister of the Environment of Estonia. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Estonia believes that it is important to discuss how to put protection, restoration and sustainable use of biodiversity at the heart of our policies and transformative actions. We should start with recognizing our growing global ecological footprints, mainly caused by economic and financial decisions that ignore carbon footprint, biodiversity loss, and the deterioration of natural assets. Therefore, I would like to highlight the high ambition coalition for nature and people, which helps us to promote synergies between climate and biodiversity and nature-based solutions under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Nature-based solutions effectively address major social, economic and environmental challenges, while simultaneously providing human well-being, ecosystem services, resilience and biodiversity benefits. Knowledge sharing and global collaboration, including with youth and other relevant stakeholders, are crucial to promote and successfully implement these solutions. I encourage you all to adopt policies for the enjoyment of the right to a clean, healthy and sustainable environment as appropriate, including with respect to biodiversity and ecosystems. Finally, I would like to emphasize that solidarity and collective actions are essential for the success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Solidarity and collective actions indeed. For our final speaker from the floor at this moment, it's my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Steffi Lemke, the Minister in the Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation, Nuclear Safety and Consumer Protection of Germany. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, a healthy environment is fundamental for our well-being and a functioning economy. We cannot continue to destroy and exploit nature if we want to preserve its many functions. We, the global community, owe this to future generations as well. It is simply a question of living and working in a way that respects the planet's ecological boundaries. In my view, the following steps are needed now to achieve this. An ambitious framework for conserving biodiversity has to be agreed this year at the UN Biodiversity Conference COP15. Governments have to incorporate nature-based solutions into their NDCs and their national biodiversity strategies and action plans. In Germany, we are currently making the necessary changes to our biodiversity strategy. And countries should ensure that 1 billion hectares of degraded land are restored by 2030. We, the global community, have to steer a new course now and not in 10 years. During the G7 presidency, Germany is also pursuing the goal to use resources more sustainably and establish a truly circular economy. This is the only way to meet the SDGs in future. The G7 countries agreed last week to step up their efforts towards a more resource-efficient, circular economy. Here, we will also be counting on the innovative strengths of small and medium-sized enterprises. And in this context, it is paramount that women and girls are involved as equal partners in decision-making at all levels, and that gender discriminatory rules are abolished. A policy that ensures intergenerational equity also requires us to be good listeners. The demands being articulated by young people today ultimately affect their own future. We can also benefit greatly from the knowledge of indigenous peoples if we listen to them respectfully. After all, for centuries, they have maintained a respectful and careful approach to nature and the environment. Ladies and gentlemen, our children and grandchildren have a right to a healthy environment in the future. This is a principle that should guide our active. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, thank you very much. And it's a beautiful place where Her Excellency has left us as she speaks about the intergenerational equity aspect of the conversation. So, Vanessa, Professor Karam, I'm coming back on stage. And Vanessa, it feels fitting at this moment to maybe ask you to, in just a minute, reflect back to us. What have you heard that's moved you? But more importantly, this is all about action. This is all about the future and doing the right thing. You spoke really incredibly well about the markers earlier on. What do you think should be the priority as we leave Stockholm+50?
Yes, I've had very beautiful statements indeed. And I've had very much needed statements. And I've also had very much appreciated statements from all the leaders. But statements are not enough.
Yeah.
In promises, we find hope and confidence. In your promises, we find hope and confidence. But when these promises are broken, we find discouragement and distrust. 50 years, we have wasted precious time. Let's not waste any more. We cannot eat coal, we cannot drink oil, and we cannot breathe gas.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, for that really powerful reflection. Professor Karam, you've been listening for over an hour. What have you heard that's moved you? But more importantly, how are you moved to act? What do you think we should be focusing on as a priority action?
Well, first of all, it's incredibly unnecessary to speak after Vanessa. I think she said it all. I think it's very important for us to understand that all of us, all of those people, distinguished people, spoke about partnerships and the importance and criticality thereof. I want to pay special tribute to the government of Norway, which was sagacious enough and wise enough and visionary enough to partner with the United Nations Environment Programme and a whole bunch of faith-based actors to realize the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative in 5 countries. Together, those 5 countries constitute 70% of the world's rainforests. If some of you here don't know, the rainforest is intimately necessary for the oxygen that we breathe. Given this visionary role, I would invite other governments who have spoken so articulately and so well and clearly seem to have very laid out plans to please work on such initiatives which bring together civil society in its completeness. We are working with a handicapped civil society, handicapped not only because of rules and regulations imposed by many countries and governments, but essentially handicapped because it doesn't work in solidarity, we heard that word plentifully, with one another. The secular civil society needs to work with the multi-religious civil society, and we need to do so in ways that are innovative and creative and that bring together all the religions, because one religion acting very powerfully anywhere in the world is actually dangerous. Many religions acting together represents and reflects the conscience. 50% of the young people in the world are affiliated in some way, shape, or form to a religious organization or a faith system that they believe in. 8 out of 10 people in the world profess to being of a particular religious tradition. 50% on average of basic health care is being provided through religious organizations. It is high time we work multi-religiously in a genuinely civic partnership, and that governments around the world can see and appreciate and learn from what is already taking place. Let us walk with both legs and both hands and one head, because that is where religion comes with all the rest of our civic space.
Thank you. Walking with both legs, both arms, and one head. Thank you very much, Professor Karam. Before I release yourself and Vanessa, let me just take the opportunity to check in with one of our co-chairs. Let me go to His Excellency Minister Gilbo and ask maybe the Minister, having listened, and I'm going to ask for a microphone to be taken to the Minister, please. There is somebody coming, Minister. Having listened to the last hour and a bit to contributions from the floor, what reaction are you having? What reflections might you like to share with us? Technical team, very fast feet, please, if I can get a microphone to the Minister. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues and friends, for thoughtful input. Collectively, lived up to the challenge of this panel to show up with creative and bold ideas. Many comments stood out from this session. I'll highlight 5 of them. The first one, emphasis on partnerships and meaningful engagement. In our formal UN language, we use terms like stakeholders or non-stake actor or constituency. Heard many of you called for a new approach. This leadership dialogue should spell out a vision to engage all civil society organizations, all levels of government, environment groups, youth groups, faith groups. They're not just stakeholders, but partners in implementation and leaders in their communities and need to be at the table. Also, human rights need to be recognized, including those of environmental defenders. Number 2, emphasis on ethics and values. Much discussion here are framed on economic terms, cost-benefit analysis, and of course this is important for good public policy. But the environmental crisis of this nature makes clear that we need more than an accounting approach. We need expanded framework on values and ethics. We need this so that our policy frameworks serve higher principles and values and not just near-term interest. Number 3, emphasis on trust. My colleague Achim Steiner reflected on the role of trust, tracking back to 1972. I love his point, and I quote, "If we are effective, we are trusted." And he pointed out that the Montreal Protocol as a great example. We need to carry this forward. Achim, I fully agree. Number 4, emphasis on energy transition. That means confronting difficult choices around coal, oil, and gas, and investment in fossil fuels. My colleague John Kerry so forcefully defined fossil fuel subsidies as the definition of insanity. And we cannot shy away from difficult discussion and decisions. And to the youth activists who spoke from Uganda, thank you for challenging us to scale up finance for clean energy over dirty energy and put real money behind our commitments. I also heard many of you underscored the need for a global biodiversity framework in 2022. We need a Paris Agreement for biodiversity. This goes hand in hand with the energy transition. And my 5th and last term is concrete action now. We need effective and fair multilateralism. Requires all of us, each of us in the room, to urgently implement existing commitments we've already made. Our existing obligations must be fully implemented.
Minister, thank you very much. It's an excellent summation of the conversation and the dialogue we've just had. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause as I also release Professor Karam and Vanessa to descend off the stage. Thank you very much for your generosity. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call up just 3 panelists now, and we're really going to have a very quick exchange on the stage. And once more, in this first leadership dialogue, we're going to come back down, open up the conversation, and really take in the contributions from the floor. It's my pleasure now to please welcome Professor Antonio Benjamin, Justice at the National High Court of Brazil and President of the Global Judicial Institute on the Environment. As he comes up, he's also joined by Madame Sunita Narayan, the Director General of the Center for Science and Environment, as she comes up. And then finally, to welcome Mr. Dario Mejia Montalvo, the leader of the National Indigenous Organization of Colombia and chair of the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. Thank you very much, and I think we can occupy these seats as well, and if we can take that one so that we are. Thank you very much. Professor Benjamin, I'm going to start off the conversation by coming to you first. One of the themes that we heard coming from the floor was the importance of strengthening the capacity of the environmental rule of law. And this is a message that we've heard today, but we've also heard in the run-up to Stockholm+50. The question to you is, what do you think is needed in the near future to really strengthen a rules-based approach to create a healthy planet and prosperity for all?
Well, first of all, we have to remember that in 1972, what we produced among different products that came out of the conference were laws. The Stockholm Declaration, and this reflected in national legislation, in constitutions, but there wasn't a single word on implementation. And judges were not present. In 1992, we met again in Rio de Janeiro. A lot of progress vis-a-vis the Stockholm Declaration. Again, not a single word on implementation, and judges were not present.
Sure.
In Stockholm now, 50 years later, we are talking about implementation, and we are talking with judges. We have justice from Supreme Courts here now, from all continents. And I think this has a very important message, that enforcement is important and the role of judges is also important. My final comment is that in 1972 we didn't speak about human rights because a large number of the participants, the states, were dictatorships. So that was banned. Nowadays, we speak freely. We might not respect them, but we speak freely about human rights, the rule of law, and more recently, the environmental rule of law.
So we're making progress.
I think we are making progress, and we have to believe in progress.
Yeah.
Because the rule of law is about progress. The protection of the environment is about progress, and civilization is about progress.
Yeah.
So we have to be optimistic.
Thank you very much, Professor Benjamin. And it's a beautiful link to the question, Dr. Narayan, that I want to bring to you about environmental injustice, right? We've heard a lot about injustice, whether it's injustice from a gender perspective, injustice across generations, amongst individuals, amongst countries. How do we then make environmental justice central to economic and financial policy making?
You do that by essentially accepting the fact that without inclusive, affordable growth, you cannot have sustainable growth. So you can't make justice, I'm sorry, you cannot make justice an add-on. You cannot make justice as something that you will do after you have done everything. Yeah. It has to be at the core of the actions that you take. Let me tell you the lessons that we are learning from my own city of Delhi. We know that we are today fighting a fight for survival, and I'm not talking about the horrendous heat wave that we have in Delhi right now, which has clear links to climate change, attributable to climate change. I'm talking about air pollution. We know we have to combat it, and a lot is being done. I mean, my government is moving to take hard, decisive steps to cut toxic air pollution. We have closed down the last coal-based power plant. We have shut down all use of coal in our city. We have brought in new fuel. But yet we find every time the weather turns adverse, pollution is back. And I say this because this really is the lesson that we need to learn from the last 50 years as we go forward. There are two things that we have learned in Delhi. One, that we need transformational action, that incremental steps will not help, that we need action which will actually, for instance, in Delhi, move people and not cars. And the second is that we need to do this in a way that it is affordable to large numbers of people. Most people in my city do not use a car. But as they move to cars, they will end up polluting. And the airshed is over. So we need inclusive growth for it to be sustainable growth. And I say this because even now, and I want to emphasize this, that we are not walking the talk when it comes to climate justice. 70% of the world's population will not have access to reliable energy by 2030 when the world has run out of the carbon budget. 70%. Now, you cannot tell that 70% to just go drown itself in some ocean. You know that as they progress, as they develop, it will add to emissions, and that will add to the stock of greenhouse gases that we cannot afford. Yeah. So clearly what we need is to use justice, not as we have done for so long to erase the principle, but actually make it the core of policy, which means that we use it for leapfrog action. We use it for transformational action. And that's really the opportunity we have today.
Justice to leapfrog, justice as a transformative action. So let me come to you, Mr. Montalvo. A healthy planet, we've been saying today, is essential for our social, but as well as our economic progress. It's essential for well-being. We've also heard today that it's essential for resilience. In your view, what role is required from indigenous peoples and local communities for effective, but also future-orientated decision-making as agents that drive this change?
Hablemos en dos direcciones.
I will look at 2 points of view on rights and duties. Since institutions and states were made, in terms of rights, indigenous people were left aside. But in fulfilling the duty of protecting life, diversity, and territory, here we have not been left behind. Here we are leading the pack. It is very important that we agree on what we understand when we talk about these things. We agree on the necessity to protect our strategic ecosystems in the world. But this cannot be at the right of not knowing the governance system that the indigenous people have had for years. Therefore, in the goal of preserving 30% of land and marine areas by 2030, we have to include safeguards to guarantee the autonomy, culture, and identity of the people. The biodiversity framework post-2020 should include as a minimum the rights approach, mainly the guarantee of our territory and our own governance as indigenous people. Recently, there was a promise that was made of a significant contribution by governments of $1.7 billion for indigenous people. This cannot be seen as compensation. Neither can it be seen as a reason for indigenous people to depend more. But this should be seen as a general criteria for the participation of all regions, for them to identify themselves in part of effective solutions for all people. We also agree on the necessity for energy transition. This is important, but it cannot be at the cost of increasing cultural injustices, political injustices, and social injustices that are already going on with the current energy mix in affecting the indigenous people around the world. So my response is, we indigenous people are main actors in this action facing climate change. And for this, we are inviting everybody so that we can work together. Thank you very much.
It's really interesting to see the threads of this conversation come together from, the rules-based approach as a way of making progress to making justice sit at the center of all policy making, and then to listen into you, sir, talking about even the opportunity of really reimagining what a just transition looks like with indigenous people and communities right at the center. So once again, what we're going to do is I'm going to invite you once more to tap into the energy that we heard from Mr. Kim Steiner, to listen the conversation into existence. I'm going to go back to the floor. We're going to take the contributions coming from the floor, and then I'm going to come back to you and listen into what you're hearing and what's really coming up to the surface. And as I do that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm starting off with His Excellency Espen Barth Eide, the Minister of Climate and Environment in Norway, who, and I can see that there's a shaking of the head, because I do see that His Excellency is not with us at the moment, which is absolutely fine. So what we're going to then do is we're going to make our way to Zambia, and I'm going to go to His Excellency Collins Nzomvu, the Minister of Green Economy and Environment from Zambia. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Zambia joins you in recognizing the fact that the planet is key for human progress and prosperity, and this recognition is very well documented and highlighted in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. We also note that there has been an increase in environmental challenges and inequalities globally that are affecting development and well-being of mankind on planet Earth. It is also a well-known fact that human activities have contributed significantly to these challenges and disturbed the normal functioning of our ecosystems, thereby limiting the provisions of goods and services, thus exacerbating challenges for humanity. It is therefore important that the global community comes together and takes advantage of the opportunities presented by Stockholm+50 to reflect on the urgent need to institute corrective measures and ensure a healthy planet and prosperity for all. Member states, therefore, including Zambia, must protect and restore ecosystems by halting deforestation and forest degradation, biodiversity loss, and other unsustainable environmental practices, recognizing that the best solution lies in letting nature heal itself. Realigning our developmental pathways by prioritizing low-carbon investments, which will ultimately create green jobs and reduce poverty and developmental inequalities. Prioritize green economy and circular economy as the foundation for sustainable development. We need to continue to implement our commitments made through various multilateral environmental agreements, which include committing to higher ambitions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions as we submit our nationally determined contributions. Ladies and gentlemen, however, the elephant in the room is provision of financial resources. Coming from the African continent, we urge all of you to come through with the commitments of doubling climate finance as per promises in Glasgow. This will ensure that we unlock financial resources. This will ensure that we utilize the natural resources in Africa. Zambia stands ready with available bankable projects in the agriculture sector, in the tourism sector, in the renewable sector, in the mining sector, to ensure that we come along to ensure there's environmental sustainability. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. A call to action to go back to the promises made in Glasgow of doubling the financial resources in the context of the needs of African states. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm making my way back to His Excellency, the Minister from Norway, who is with us right now, and I'd like to give you the floor, please, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. The future is renewable, circular, nature positive, and pollution-free. We just have to get there, and we need to get there faster than what the speed of change right now. First, I want to lend my voice to all those who said that 2022 needs to be the year in which nature and biodiversity catches up with climate. We used to treat it as the little brother of the climate quest, but it has to be really on pair. We need a Paris moment for nature, and we need to integrate that into our economy. On that front, net zero is not good enough. We need a nature-positive economy, and that has to be integrated in all decision-making, private sector, investors, public sector, regulatory measures. It's doable. There's an economy there to be developed, but we need to do the job. The other thing we need to do with full speed is to stop thinking that we can do incremental change, small adaptation. We need a fundamental, deep decarbonization of everything. And while I agree with all those saying that that requires producing clean energy, of course it does, it requires something much more complicated, which is to make clean energy available to all, and also to make sure that you can use clean energy in all the different sectors of the economy. That means in industry, it means in transport, it means in agriculture, it means in construction, and you name it. It's really necessary to have an energy transition that is strategic, that is foresighted, and where you connect the producer to the consumer in much more creative ways than we've seen so far. Again, that's possible. Again, there is an economy out there to be created, but we need to make that change now. And my last point, Madam Moderator, is that the value of these meetings lies not in our words, but in our deeds. And we cannot allow the discrepancy to continue any longer between what we promise to do and what we actually do, because that will take away all trust and all faith from young people in what we're doing. So as soon as we come back, we need to actually start doing what we commit collectively to do in this meeting. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, thank you very much. The discrepancy between what we promise to do and what we actually do needs to come to an end. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I'm making my way to His Excellency Matthew Samuda, the Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation of Jamaica. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, colleagues, it's indeed my privilege to join you this afternoon. 50 plus years, that's longer than I've been alive, longer than many of the persons in the room have been alive. And there are many achievements for which we should be proud. There's also the manifestation of many of our worst fears, so there is indeed much work to be done. I think hearing colleagues this afternoon, I think a way to summarize the discussions we've had is that indeed a sustainable economic growth cannot come from environmental degradation, and inclusive prosperity cannot be steeped in pollution. If we follow the Stockholm+50 theme and we consider, well, what does a healthy planet really mean to us in this room, and what does it mean to our varying constituent groups? It's clean and accessible water, it's clean air so that our people don't face climate-induced respiratory illnesses, it's quality soil for our farmers, it's thriving biodiversity, and it's a healthy ocean. And that's a whole lot to consider. What is this prosperity, and how do we access it in a sustainable manner that keeps all of these dreams for a healthy planet alive? I mean, it's inclusive of opportunity for all of our people. It's our citizens living above the poverty line. It's access to modern goods and services without breaching our sustainability targets. Action must come from the multilateral process. It includes scaling up finance, it includes fixing the access issues, and it includes application harmonization amongst the donor agencies so that small island developing states can truly have a chance to access these funds for adaptation. It also means that we must explore the interlinkages and look for enhanced synergies in the implementation of the multilateral processes and indeed the conventions that we are all signatories to. Jamaica, like all others here, want a healthy planet. We have enhanced our NDCs and we have committed to a 28.5% reduction in our emissions by 2030. We are moving towards our 30-30 targets for protected landmass and sea, and we are also midway in a 3 million tree planting initiative, one for each citizen for our small island. We also wish to close in saying that we supported the decisions of UNIA 5.2. We ask that we move very quickly with our INC, moving towards a global treaty to end plastic pollution. This target, the other targets that we've all discussed, are within reach, colleagues. It requires action, and be assured that Jamaica will play its part.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. Targets are within reach, but we need to act and move beyond the targets. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I'm going to the distinguished representative from Living Law and giving them the floor for 2 minutes, and I'm scanning my room to make sure I have located the right person. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished speakers, guests. It's challenging to add something here that's not already been said by colleagues during this debate. There's everything to say, but also nothing. We know what needs to be done to deliver just, managed and equitable transitions. I'm an environmental lawyer from Scotland. Let me say, speaking as a lawyer rather than an activist, increasingly it is portrayed by some as activists to stand for the environmental rule of law. That must change. In seeking a new era of environmental ethic, we urge you to reflect on the title of this conference, A Healthy Planet for the Prosperity of All. The Stockholm Declaration was indeed remarkable and foresighted for its time. We must show the same foresight now. We know the crises we face are much greater and multi-scale in an increasingly interconnected world. COVID-19 has sharply reminded us of that. Protection of the interconnected Earth system, as with energy, is a matter of security. Events in Ukraine too remind us that nature never wins in conflict. The environmental crisis is, at its heart, an ethics crisis in all its dimensions. In confronting these internet-connected challenges, we urge emphasis towards rights-based approaches in law. This requires the full implementation of the legal human right to a healthy environment, as reinforced by the Human Rights Council last year. These rights belong to all people. Priority towards the protection of environmental defenders, strengthening and amplifying the space for youth who inspire, but equally urging the ethical responsibility for decision makers to step up and act. Youth are holding you accountable, but this cannot rest on their shoulders. We need greater governance mechanisms for the representation of the rights of the child and also future generations for those rights holders, and for funding to reach the right places to promote genuine empowerment, diversity and non-discrimination. But for real leadership and a pathway forward in law towards harmony with nature for the next 50 years, we call for the recognition of the rights of nature. This reflects the reality: we are nature. We cannot negotiate with her or with science. Litigation may show promise in some quarters, but we need bold actions in law in addition to closing the compliance gap. At this inflection point, it's easy to be cynical, but the changes can be made to drive the urgent systemic transitions needed. Stockholm+50 is the opportunity to recommit concretely to this requisite ethical paradigm shift to address these interconnected crises. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madame. It is a requisite paradigm shift that is being called for. Distinguished guests, I'm going now to the distinguished speaker and representative from World Resources Institute. The floor is yours, please, sir.
Thank you, and thank you, co-chairs, for giving World Resources Institute an opportunity to be part of this historic gathering in beautiful Stockholm. I'd like to speak briefly about a key rule of law issue raised by Minister Gilbo as well as Professor Benjamin, nature crime, which poses a key barrier to our efforts on climate change, biodiversity, food security, and sustainable development. By nature crime, I mean the exploitation of species and ecosystems in defiance of national laws, international agreements, or the rights and customary practices of indigenous peoples. It encompasses the criminal forms of logging, mining, fishing, wildlife trade, and the illegal conversion of forests for commercial agriculture. These crimes are often associated with illicit financial activity, corruption, and human rights violations. Nature crime is thought to be the third largest illicit economy in the world. The forces behind nature crime are powerful, organized, and sophisticated. Their profits fuel corruption, terrorism, and other criminal activity, making nature crime a leading threat to peace, prosperity, and global stability. We hear much about nature-based solutions to climate change and other problems, but make no mistake, no responsible investor or donor will put 1 penny into these kinds of nature-based activities and solutions in lawless environments where the state cannot guarantee the long-term integrity of natural ecosystems, or worse, where elements of the state itself are actually those involved in the exploitation of nature in illegal ways. So what can be done? First, we need to dramatically raise the awareness and political profile of nature crime and its impacts. Second, we must increase funding for combating nature crime by an order of magnitude. Third, we must enhance operational capacity and cooperation within and between states and through innovative partnerships that include our governments, civil society, and the private sector. Finally, we cannot really penalize the activities of indigenous people and local communities as criminal. Rather, we must support those environmental defenders on the front lines of this effort against nature crime and hold accountable the powerful and the corrupt interests who victimize all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nature crime, and how do we engage and approach it? And I'm sure there might be some reactions from the panel on that. Ladies and gentlemen, I am making my way to representative on behalf of His Excellency Nino Tandilashvili, the Deputy Minister of Environmental Protection and Agriculture from Georgia. Please go ahead, Madam.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to be here today
And to speak on behalf of Georgia, it is obvious that climate change is one of the challenges and challenging issues for our humanity and for the economic development. Obviously, the increased threat of extreme weather events caused by the climate change is a challenge for all of us, especially the poorest and the most vulnerable groups of our communities. And Georgia, the country which is located in the South Caucasus region with the economy of transition, is one of the countries which is very vulnerable to the impacts of the climate change. And we think that though individualized responsibilities for fighting against climate change often manage to make changes at the global level, this process will not be successful unless the whole societies are involved in combating climate risks. We all understand that climate change is a cross-cutting issue that really needs massive coordination both within the government, private sector, and the society. A higher impact action is needed to reduce emissions if we are to achieve the temperature goal of the Paris Agreement. And here, the role of green and resilient transformation and development of circular economy on national levels is crucial in this process. And it is also essential to ensure private sector engagement in sustainable development, and also incentivize innovative and technological solutions, especially in developing countries and countries with economies in transition. It is also important to raise the environmental education system and awareness raising, which plays a key role in this process. And as a last point, I'm confident that further promoting the human rights-based approach to environment will significantly contribute to more efficient and effective implementation of environmental regulations and multilateral environmental treaties. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Madam. So it is about increasing the efficiency and the effectiveness of our actions. I'm making my way to Her Excellency Ilaria Fontana, the Under-Secretary of State and in the Ministry for Ecological Transition in Italy. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you. In qualità di rappresentante del governo italiano vorrei ringraziare i coorganizzatori dell'opportunità molto importante e molto bella di confronto. L'urgenza dell'azione è un tema ricorrente nella storia dell'umanità degli ultimi decenni. Già nel 1972 la pubblicazione del rapporto del Club di Roma I limiti della crescita segnalava la necessità di intervenire tempestivamente. Tuttavia, ora dobbiamo affrontare problemi di una dimensione più ampia e dobbiamo confrontarci con la preoccupazione legata al vincolo temporale. La comunità scientifica internazionale ha chiarito ancora una volta che la neutralità climatica intorno alla metà del secolo è l'unica opzione che abbiamo per contenere l'innalzamento del riscaldamento globale entro 1,5 gradi. Analogamente è chiaro che è quanto mai necessario agire ora. È lecito attendersi che le azioni intraprese nel 2022 daranno forma al prossimo decennio di transizione climatica ed energetica. Perché il prossimo decennio? Perché ciò che resta a disposizione per fermare la crisi climatica e promuovere la transizione energetica. La posta in gioco per l'agenda clima-energia è molto alta. In linea con il contesto di riferimento europeo, in Italia il legame tra clima ed energia rappresenta un elemento strategicamente importante per accelerare la riduzione delle emissioni di gas serra, il raggiungimento degli obiettivi dell'Accordo di Parigi e il perseguimento di un sistema energetico sostenibile. La decarbonizzazione in Italia è un pilastro centrale del Piano Nazionale di Ripresa e Resilienza nell'ambito del programma europeo Next Generation EU. Oltre alla decarbonizzazione diretta, quindi alla modifica delle modalità di produzione dell'energia primaria, il piano prevede una decarbonizzazione indiretta che mira alla riduzione della domanda di energia e a interventi sulle matrici suolo, acqua e alle foreste. Gli interventi indiretti hanno un'importanza uguale o addirittura maggiore di quelli diretti, in particolare le azioni sull'efficienza delle risorse, sull'economia circolare, sulla gestione dei rifiuti e sull'inquinamento da plastica, che possono contribuire in modo significativo significativo alla sostenibilità dei modelli di produzione e consumo e quindi alla riduzione delle emissioni. Il Piano Nazionale di Ripresa e Resilienza stanzia 2,10 miliardi di euro per l'economia circolare e la gestione dei rifiuti, compresa la filiera della plastica. A tal proposito l'Italia ha messo in atto azioni strutturali per combattere l'inquinamento da plastica, aderendo ad iniziative internazionali attraverso l'eliminazione delle plastiche monouso e dei prodotti cosmetici contenenti microplastiche. Per questo motivo l'Italia accoglie con favore le attività che si stanno svolgendo in attuazione della risoluzione UNEA 5/14 relativa all'istituzione di uno strumento giuridicamente vincolante per combattere l'inquinamento da plastica. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to the distinguished representative from Latvia for the floor. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor and possibility to speak on behalf of Latvian delegation. We would like to raise 3 questions. How to turn the trend on climate change, pollution and loss on biodiversity. Latvia is a committed European Union member state in this region on the Baltic Sea coast. And we very much support the goal agreed by European Union on Green Deal towards climate neutrality by 2050. How do we get there? In our country, we are doing this like improving energy efficiency by also acting on electricity production and changing transport infrastructure by 2030. We consider that the principle leave no one behind is important on 3 levels: individual, stakeholders, and business level. If the effort is made not including citizens or leaving them feeling unfairly treated, this will not give an impact. On engaging with companies, in Latvia, green procurement law is already in place. It applies to state and local government authorities and also engages business in making their activities and practices sustainable and engaged. We would also like to address issues on plastic pollution. Latvia calls on all participants on full life cycle of plastic without them possibly finding way into the sea. So therefore, finally, I would like to call and express the example of regional cooperation as a part of global activity on the Baltic Sea and HELCOM Regional Marine Litter Action Plan that is in place already. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Distinguished Representative from Latvia. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to the voice of a young person as we listen to the distinguished representative of the MENA Youth Network. You have the floor.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Lian. I'm the co-founder of the MENA Youth Network, and I'm here to present the demands on behalf of the youth constituency. So to begin with, the climate action we've been seeing today is not enough. We are in a disaster. The leaders have failed us, and they are continuing to fail us. For example, governments can just decide to withdraw from climate agreements and treaties. They can cut climate budgets whenever they are faced with external crises. They do not deliver on their pledges. While the young people are sitting outside decision-making spaces, fossil fuel lobbyists are walking in and out and influencing outcomes. We demand that real action starts here and now at Stockholm+50. First, we ask Stockholm+50 to recommend setting a nature-positive goal for 2030 with respect to biodiversity and a goal for chemical pollution and waste alongside the 1.5 degrees target. This will ensure an inclusive planetary action. Second, we call upon introducing mandatory greenhouse gas reporting, human rights and environmental due diligence laws for listed corporations, and a legally binding international treaty to cover global trade and supply chains. Such legislation must have a substantial liability and enforcement regime. Third, we highlight that sustainable consumption and production is a cross-cutting priority. We call upon Stockholm+50 to recommend creation of a governance space for the SCP through the UN General Assembly and One Planet Network. We highlight that a functioning SCP governance is essential to achieving societal transformation. Finally, we call upon enhanced financing for youth. All climate and environmental funds, including the Green Climate Fund, need to include youth-inclusive financing priorities. Funds must reach into the hands of youth-led organizations and initiatives. Ladies and gentlemen, we call on the leaders of Stockholm+50 to prioritize people over profits. We are tired of the greenwashing. We are tired of the youth tokenism. We will not accept any more false promises. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The voices of young people, tired of the greenwashing, tired of the youth tokenism, and demanding real change. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to the distinguished representative from ProVeg International. You have the floor, madam.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. My name is Juliette Tronchon, and I'm working for ProVeg International, but I am also a young activist fighting for a sustainable and just future. While I appreciate the work of the leadership dialogues on climate change and its effects, I regret not seeing a stronger emphasis on food systems and particularly on the negative consequences of industrial animal agriculture on the environment, human health, and on livelihood of indigenous and local communities. The farming and eating of animals contributes to at least 20% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and animal agriculture is one of the leading causes of deforestation. Food system as a whole should be put in the center of the climate discussion. That means more than just having food systems as a sub-message in the background paper or used for greenwashing. We cannot afford to waste any more time. The science is clear. We must change the food system drastically, moving towards a more plant-based diets, especially in rich countries. But there is hope. I applaud the highlight in key message 4 of necessary measures to be taken in the agricultural sector. Eliminating our food subsidies, promoting policies for sustainable food systems, and facilitating access to affordable and nutritious food are required if we are serious about achieving the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals. But commitments by national governments, and especially global North countries, is lacking. If we look at most countries' NDCs, there are no specific targets on agriculture and food system. And yet, tackling the climate crisis starting from this sector could be the easiest solution if we want to meet international goals short term. Stockholm+50 is sending a strong message to our leaders for a better future. Now we need them to listen and take action, including on food systems and plant-based diets. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bringing food systems and nutrition into sharp focus in the conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm making my way now to His Excellency Christian Fernandez, the Vice Minister of Multilateral Affairs of Costa Rica. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, Costa Rica, even though a small country, has a long-term recognition for environment as an integral component of our development agenda. We have stopped reforestation, and we are increasing our life expectation. We have 90% electrical network, which is renewable, and this is a source of employment, not forgetting ecotourism. Health a healthy planet will offer us a lot, but we need a paradigm change so that we push up policies for job employment and a resilient economy that includes payment for services, that it recognizes and pays for the roles of the indigenous people and those that are involved in the conservation of our ecosystem. There is still a lot to be done in order to fulfill the promises that we have made. And here in Stockholm, 1972, we talked about the implementation, and here today we need to talk about the implementation of Agenda 2030. We will continue pursuing our principles through joint initiatives with a commitment to be leaders for nature and the high-level coalition for nature to protect 30% of our land and sea by 2030. We are optimistic. We are achieving this. In recent months, we have increased our protected areas and national parks and the marine parks. And we are creating a new biological reserve in the bicentenary of our republic, and we are adding more than 500,000 miles in our parks, which will be beneficial for the biodiversity, mitigation of climate change, and will boost our tourism. We continue calling urgently to move beyond the GDP when we talk about countries. We have to look at different indicators so that we have the transformative change that we need. If we can increase our collective ambition, then today let us use the voice of the youth as well, but we also have to accelerate our national implementation of the same ambitions in order to fulfill our responsibilities for current and future generations to implement just solutions to deal with climate change and biodiversity loss and pollution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Beyond GDP, as we look at the economic and other activity in different markets, distinguished guests, I'm coming to Her Excellency Martha Delgado, the Undersecretary for Multilateral Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Mexico. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Muchas gracias. Voy a hablar.
Thank you very much. I'm going to speak in Spanish. And I'm going to change what I was going to say because I have been attentively listening to what has been said by everybody who have spoken. So I would like to say that I, as a young person, when I was a young person, I was an activist on the UN conferences, and I was part of the Stockholm conference in 1972. And I was Lynn's age, who's seated right here, and who has talked to us about young people when I participated in the government consultations of Mexico for the Rio summit in 1992. And also, I was part of the Climate Action Network as part of the CSOs that talked about fossils of the days, and countries were committed to reduce greenhouse gases during this meeting. Many of the things that we have heard in this fora are almost word to word what we're hearing today, and we had them 50 years ago. We were unable to listen to each other. We have been unable to be able to access the accelerated protection of our planet. So we are here, we see leaders speak and they leave, and here we are left speaking among ourselves. But in reality, there is little attention being paid to what we need to do, and more attention is being paid to what needs to be said. But we must not forget there have been successes. Before, we did not see young people speaking in front of ministers. We had CSOs at the side, indigenous people at the side, and ministers were seated here. So these are successes that we must take note of. And what I would like to say, it never occurred to me that in my life I would be able to see this kind of change, to have an organic plastic paper that does not lead to waste. This also never crossed my mind. I also never thought that I would live at a time where sea could be desalinized. Now we are seeing a paradigm change that we need. Therefore, we see that it is viable because humanity has access to technology and possibilities that are real. Allow me to conclude by saying this. Just one final message. COVID-19 has forced us to change a lot of things because of fear, and we have been able to do this quickly. We have changed the way we work, we have changed our health habits, and we have changed how we relate to one another. And in 50 years, we have been unable to change small human practices that could have saved the planet from within. Therefore, I believe small actions could greatly contribute and lead us to reflect how we acted during COVID and how we can act to save our planet from a disaster. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A beautiful linkage back to 1972 and to be here 50 years later and have that comparative advantage of the conversations then and the conversations now. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to Her Excellency Tamar Zandberg, of course, the Minister of Environmental Protection from Israel. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Excellencies, colleagues, and friends, we are currently facing the triple crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Finding effective solutions require that we act together across communities, borders, and nationalities. In Israel, we have been promoting several initiatives that aim in creating engagement, interaction, and inclusiveness. Recently, the Israeli government approved the climate law, building on collaborative work with all relevant ministries. The law established targets and creates mechanisms for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but also preparing and adapting climate change and its risks. Our government has also ensured significant funding to make sure that the transition to a low-carbon economy is just and leaves no one behind. As part of a plan that we will launch next week, our ministry intends to allocate significant funds to Israel's Arab minority population. Over the coming years, we intend to invest billions in carbon-resilient infrastructure and improved waste management for these vulnerable populations. The project will engage the local residents by holding extensive public consultation and creating local young leadership. It is our duty to provide the future generation with the tools to strengthen climate resilience and to avoid the mistakes of past generations, our generation. We have developed a climate and sustainability study program for Israeli school students from kindergarten to high school. The program will be integrated into the range of school curricula and activities, and for the first time, it will also be integrated into the activities of youth movements. Israel, my friends, is known as the startup nation, and that is also true in the fields of innovative technologies on climate. Israel is already a world leader on issues like water usage, arid agriculture, and of course, food tech and alternative protein. We look forward to sharing them with the world so that Israel can contribute to the global fight against climate change in ways that way exceed our size. We must seize opportunities together, be it across generations, across sectors, across social groups, and across political borders. It is the only way to build a sustainable future for all. Thank you.
Your Excellency, thank you very much. And I am making my way swiftly right now to His Excellency Petros Varilidis, the Secretary General of the Ministry of Environment and Energy in Greece. Over to you, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. These last 50 years, a lot of progress has been made. However, entry into the global system is slow speed. You know, it's a big system, it's inertia, it's different views. So inevitably, we need to go back home and do our own homework. We need to take action on ourselves. And that's what we do in Greece. For us, the green transition is fundamental for our future. We have taken measures to support nature and protect nature. We have declared 30% of our land as protected area. We have overhauled our nature management system in order to also include better the local society, because sometimes if you are over-ambitious, that renders the local society against protection. So you need to find the right balance. We have imposed a fee on plastic cups in order to reduce their use, because, you know, in capitalism, the most effective tools are those that have to do with costs. And finally, 10 days ago, we have adopted our first climate law that includes a very clear roadmap for the full decarbonization of our economy by 2050. We foresee that by 2028, we will close all our lignite plants, and we have foreseen specific measures for buildings, for vehicles, and for the industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for giving us some very practical examples in which Greece is leveraging policy to really make progress in the right direction. I'm making my way over now to the distinguished representative from Nepal. Madam, I'd love to give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, distinguished participants. Let me express my delegation's sincere gratitude to the distinguished co-chairs, panelists, and the moderator for steering this session with high professionalism. As a party to major environment-related conventions, Nepal has taken various initiatives to formulate appropriate legal instruments and standards, institutional and financial arrangements to conserve biodiversity, control pollution, and manage environmental issues. Nepal has raised high climate ambition through enhanced NDCs to reach net zero emissions by 2045. We have given high priority to achieving SDGs by 2030 and developed partnerships with the private sectors and community-based organizations for green and climate resilient development. We are facing a number of challenges due to the negative impacts of climate change. While the road to realizing our future course of action is not smooth, the COVID crisis further exacerbates the vulnerability, reinforcing the interconnectedness of social, environmental, and economic systems. During such a compounded crisis, the global community has failed in its planetary responsibility. The commitment of $100 billion in annual climate finance by 2020 was not made. Greenhouse gas emissions were not reduced as expected. Therefore, the Stockholm+50 should walk the talk to implement the promises with renewed commitment for the health of our people and the planet. This is a defining moment in the history of mankind. We must recognize the importance of multilateralism in tackling the Earth's triple planetary crisis of biodiversity loss, climate change, and pollution, which become the greatest challenge of our time. There is an urgent need for action if we are to achieve a healthy planet and prosperity of all. The Stockholm+50 meeting should be a game-changer event that would help us all in strengthening solidarity, cooperation, and coordination among the stakeholders, including the private sectors, to address the ongoing and emerging environmental issues. To that end, we need a strong political will at all levels with commensurate means of implementation and enhanced technological capacity on an urgent basis for achieving our common goal of healthy planet, people, and shared prosperity to all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam. That is the distinguished representative from Nepal. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to the distinguished representative from New Zealand. Sir, you have the floor.
Co-chairs, panel members, excellencies and friends, thank you for the opportunity to speak at this leadership dialogue. In Aotearoa, New Zealand, we are focused on the system-level changes that need to be made now in order to achieve meaningful change in our relationship with the environment for future generations. We have recognised we need to move from conventional concepts of land use to setting positive outcomes for the quality of the environment and the restoration of ecological systems. This requires clear targets and limits. National plans for climate mitigation and adaptation need to cover all sectors and actors across our environmental system and economy in multi-year cycles of action and with clear lines of accountability across our political system and public service. These require transformational shifts in the way we develop and implement policy to achieve system-wide outcomes for the environment and economy. They require ambition, action and accountability. Partnerships. We believe that to be successful, this work must be done at a new level of partnership. In New Zealand, our climate response requires the combined effort of government, Māori, unions, communities, local government and businesses for a just and inclusive transition. In all our policy and processes, we must work with and alongside Indigenous peoples and incorporate Indigenous knowledge systems and Indigenous worldviews. Our plans must be embraced and implemented as plans for all citizens. At the same time as setting the conditions for long-term impact, we have to take urgent action now in the systems we already have and contribute meaningfully to collective global action. In many areas of environmental policy, such as resource management, biodiversity and climate change adaptation, this requires a complex timetable of actions, transitions and transformations in our system and increasingly challenging demands on our partners and stakeholders as we seek their input and expertise across all aspects. However, it is exactly this commitment and level of engagement that we believe is needed for a genuine shift in environmental outcomes as we respond to the crisis we are in, but with actions that will be truly embedded in the way we live, work and experience Te Taiao, the natural world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the distinguished representative from New Zealand. And ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the contributions from the floor. I'm going to make my way back onto the stage, but as I do, I want to pick up on some of the comments that we've heard, especially in the final speaker from New Zealand, speaking about Indigenous peoples and communities. And I want to maybe then start with you, Mr. Montalvo. Having listened again for over an hour, what has really resonated with you, but what do you think could be a singular action that we should be prioritizing as we leave Stockholm+50? To you, sir, in 1 minute.
Gracias, difícil.
Thank you. This is a difficult task in 1 minute. I will summarize in 2 words: humility and coherence. Humility, so that we understand that life, spirituality, and energy are synonymous. We have seen that they have been separated by religion, science, economy, politics, and this has led to disasters and huge injustices. This is my first word: humility. Coherence, so that what is said is actually done. And so that sometimes when you talk about helping, if we need a helping hand, often when we say help, it might need withdraw your hand, take away your hand from us. When we talk about coherence in action, it is important so that we understand the criminalization against the defenders of nature around the world.
Absolutely love the approach of latching onto two words that really capture what we've heard, and thank you for humility and coherence. So maybe let me work my way this way and go to you, Professor Benjamin. What are your two words? What have you, if you could reduce what you've heard over the last hour and a bit, 2 hours actually, because you've been in the room since the beginning of the dialogue, what would your two words be?
I have more than two. What I can say is that what I heard very much synthesize the 2 days in which judges met in Stockholm in a symposium of Supreme Court and senior judges. First of all, that the outcome document should begin with the recognition of the centrality of the environmental rule of law. Second, that we should recognize that laws that are not implemented are worthless. So implementation is absolutely crucial for the success of the promise that we make. Third, that the right place for those that kill environmental defenders is not in the streets of our cities or in the forests of our planet. It is after fair trial behind bars. I think that's, in a summary, what we judges and the Global Judicial Institute would like to see. My final point, if I may, is that when we speak about justice and judges, that's not the same thing. Judges are human beings. Judges need to learn, to understand, to listen. And when they speak, they need to speak for the protection of the foundations of life. Not because they want to do it, not because they think it's necessary, but because that's what international agreements, constitutional provisions, and thousands of laws around the world tell them to do.
Yeah.
That's our responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Benjamin. That is the responsibility. Dr. Narayan, as you close us off, if you might have more than 2 words, but I'm going to try 2 words. If you could pick and lift to the surface 2 words that you say really reflect what you've heard in the last 3 hours, what would that be?
So I think one, urgency. I mean, it is very clear that the world has run out of time. That is one difference between 50 years ago and today. 50 years ago, we talked about the possibility of climate change. Today, we see it happening.
Yeah.
We know that we need to act, and we need to act together. And that's my second word. Because what is also very clear is that today, more than ever before, we know that we have an interdependent world, that we have to act together. And that then brings me, and if you will forgive me, to my third word, which is courage. Because I think what all this tells us is that we need to act decisively, it has to be transformational, and we cannot repeat the mistakes of the past. Business as usual is not good enough. Taking incremental steps is not good enough. Greenwashing is not good enough. We are going to have to make sure that we can not just walk the talk, but we can actually run the talk. And that's going to take courage.
Not just walk the talk, but run the talk, and it takes courage to do that. Now, before I release my panelists, I maybe just want to tap in out into one of our co-chairs and go to Minister Miranda. Minister, from where you may be seated, what have you heard in the last 3 hours? And if you want to reduce it to 2 words too, you're more than welcome. But what's really stood out for you in the last 3 hours?
Thank you. It is a challenge to reduce it to 2 words. I will reduce it to 4 short paragraphs. First, multilateralism is absolutely necessary. We have to work together between south to north, east to west, not depending the richest or the poorness of the country. We have to treat this as the world has no boundaries.
Yeah.
So multilateralism. The second one, we need to create just transition. We have to work in a just transition. Then forest and people is together.
Yeah.
Poor countries, we don't deforest, we don't cut a tree because we're fighting against nature.
Yeah.
We cut a tree because it's the way of them to eat. It's a $50 thing. So it's a matter of survival. So the thing is forest, people, creating job by conservation. And the last thing that we have heard it in the whole hallways here in this panel, we have to work in plastic pollution solutions. I had something more long prepared, but now that you encourage me, and I know they will like this summary.
No, Coach, I think it's an excellent summary. You've taken 4 paragraphs and you've made them succinct into 4 practical actions. And I do not doubt that we're going to be building on that. So I'm keen for us to close off and to call back our co-chairs to close off for us. But before we do that, we heard a lot about technology today. So let's also see if we can put some of that technology to the test. We don't have a full room, but I do think that the people in the room might be able to get the job done. So what I'm going to ask us to do is to do a quick Mentimeter. So coming up on your screen right now, you're seeing a question, but above the question is an invitation for you to go to www.menti.com. And when you get there, you're going to be prompted for a code. The code is 592048884. You can see it on your screen. It's 592048884. And please be mindful, I'm watching you to see who's pulling out their cell phones, because that then gives me the courage and the hope and the optimism that when we talk technology, we really mean it. And there we go. You've already answered the question. What is the one action that you can take for a healthy planet, for the prosperity of all? This is about your one individual action that you can take from today. And distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you can see my screen as well. What we're seeing is that I can build peace. I can drive environmental education. I can ensure youth engagement. I can enforce commitments. I can decarbonize everything. I really love that. And maybe just one more that says, I can scale down. And the words keep popping up onto the screen. And with that, I'd like you all to please give a warm round of applause to my panelists and at the same time, welcome our co-chairs back onto the stage. Let's give them a round of applause, please. Thank you very much. Thank you for your amazing participation in that word cloud. The co-chairs are now going to give us their closing remarks and officially close the meeting.
Thank you. Wonderful. Gracias. Thank you. Gracias a ti. Gracias. Gracias. Muchas gracias. Thank you so much. Sí, sí, muchas gracias. Muchas gracias. I would like to thank Mrs. Nosipo Shabalala for so expertly moderating our discussion this afternoon. As well, thank you. She deserved it. As well as the panelists and all the participants for their active engagement. I have some highlights, and I'm going to be briefly and short. And I'm going to switch. No, I'm not going to switch to interpreters. There's no interpreter. So I'll switch plans. I will keep in English. I love that the first panel, the first angle of their speech was changing business as usual. I felt that they were talking from the human side. I heard that they were saying we have we have to change business as usual. They said, we have to change human behavior. She said, we have to work with the institutions of fate, nothing more stronger than fate. We have to work with human attitude. They said as well that every town, every country in the world has the right to be heard. We need to accept the IPCC results, with no doubt. Mr. Kerry said it's a matter of numbers. It's a matter of physics. We need to work with multilateralism, but Vanessa said, no expense money. We need to work with grants in order to balance. Vanessa said as well that we need to find a way to solve the loss and damage. Mr. Kerry said a very strong phrase saying, the ones who can make the difference, they are indifference, but we don't. Spain as well, we have to invest in science, regulation, education, among other issues. Botswana, I keep a short thing. They said we have to include young people. We have to balance between what we are investing in good and in bad, in arms, in chemicals, or nature conservancy. We have to, Marco said, we have to not just be sustainable, we have to be nature positive and carbon neutral. It is a two-path way for this, and we need local action. I think we need to really listen to the Colombia representative about to protect the ones who want to raise their voice, and there are exposures to death sometimes. I love the comment about Republican Dominican saying men's already demonstrate they couldn't do it. We have to leave the space to women. And Germany second that. They said, indigenous people, they know, they have shown us how to treat nature. We have to listen to indigenous people and gender equality. The indigenous people, they are part of the change, definitely. And I want to start closing by the positive attitude, once again, of Norway, Spen. Spen says, his sentence, the future, is no doubt. We have a circular future, we have a natural, a positive nature, we have a clean energy future, and we have to work in the last mile between connecting farmer and consumers. Thank for that optimism, leaving no doubt that that's the future. I think we have to take the example of Costa Rica, a tiny country, 5 times smaller than ours, than Ecuador. And you have shown us that the way is the ecological way, the sustainable way. No arms, ecotourism, no exploitation of oil, among others. So you are an inspiration for all the world as well. As well as Mexico. You share your experience before. How was your life becoming here? And you said your optimism that before you never had a Vanessa here. You never have the right to speak. And now they are becoming part of the group. I truly believe that we don't need $8 million population of perfect environmentalists. We need 8 million imperfectly environmentalists. We need to start working. So with these words, I now invite my distinguished fellow co-chair, and now my friend, the Excellency Stephen Guilbeault, Minister of Environment and Climate of Canada, to deliver his closing remarks. Please.
Thank you very much, Minister Manrique. I want to thank each and every one of you for your important contribution to the discussion today. It is obvious that over the last 50 years, we have come a long way, but our collaboration and our ambition must progress more rapidly, which will enable us to achieve our collective goals of having a healthy planet and a healthy population. I'm eager to work with you, my friend, as well as our co-presenters from Sweden and Kenya, as well as the co-president of the second and third dialogue on the leadership to present the recommendation on concrete measures on what we've heard today so that they will be reflected in the conclusion for Stockholm+50. I'm convinced that a new multilateralism will help us to meet and surpass our goals for concrete action. Our experiences in the pandemic has changed all of us. And all over the world, citizens are calling for governments to do more for our planet. As leaders at the decision-making table, today's discussions will be an important contribution to help us to heed that call. Before concluding this leadership dialogue, I would like to remind you that the international meeting will continue in general debate under Agenda Item 7 tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. in the Planetary Hall, while Leadership Dialogue 2 on achieving a sustainable and inclusive recovery from the coronavirus disease pandemic will be held in this room at 10 a.m. Leadership Dialogue 1 of the Stockholm+50 International Meeting will conclude in 1 short minute. Back over to you.
Before concluding this leadership dialogue, I would like to remind you that the international meeting will continue in general debate under the Agenda Item 7 tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. in the Plenary Hall, while Leadership Dialogue 2 on achieving a sustainable and inclusive recovery from the coronavirus disease pandemic will be held in this room at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Leadership Dialogue 1 of Stockholm+50 International Meeting is now concluded. The meeting is adjourned.
That was